Today we have another episode of a remarkable novel by Charles Dickens, Bleak House. Set in Victorian England, this story immerses us in a world filled with mysteries, complex characters, and profound reflections on society and human nature. We hope this episode helps you relax and prepare for sleep. Be sure to check out the entire playlist for more. Enjoy the listening. Mr. and Mrs. Snagsby are not only one bone and one flesh, but to the neighbors thinking one voice too. That voice appearing to proceed from Mrs. Snagsby alone is heard in Cook's Court very often. Mr. Snagsby, otherwise than as he finds expression through these dulcet tones, is rarely heard. He is a mild, bald, timid man with a shining head and a scrubby clump of black hair sticking out at the back. He tends to meekness and obesity. As he stands at his door in Cook's Court in his gray shop coat and black calico sleeves, looking up at the clouds, or stands behind a desk in his dark shop with a heavy flat ruler, snipping and slicing at sheepskin in company with his two prentices, he is emphatically a retiring and unassuming man. From beneath his feet at such times as from a shrill ghost unquiet in its grave, there frequently arise complainings and lamentations in the voice already mentioned. And haply, on some occasions when these reach a sharper pitch than usual, Mr. Snagsby mentions to the prentices, "I think my little woman is a-giving it to Guster." This proper name, so used by Mr. Snagsby, has before now sharpened the wit of the cook's courtiers to remark that it ought to be the name of Mrs. Snagsby, seeing that she might with great force and expression be termed a Guster, in compliment to her stormy character. It is, however, the possession, and the only possession except 50 shillings per annum and a very small box indifferently filled with clothing, of a lean young woman from a workhouse, by some supposed to have been christened Augusta, who, although she was farmed or contracted for during her growing time by an amiable benefactor of his species resident at Tooting, and cannot fail to have been developed under the most favorable circumstances, has fits, which the parish can't account for. Guster, really aged 3 or 4 and 20, but looking around 10 years older, goes cheap with this unaccountable drawback of fits, and is so apprehensive of being returned on the hands of her patron saint that except when she is found with her head in the pail, or the sink, or the copper, or the dinner, or anything else that happens to be near her at the time of her seizure, she is always at work. She is a satisfaction to the parents and guardians of the prentices, who feel that there is little danger of her inspiring tender emotions in the breast of youth. She is a satisfaction to Mrs. Snagsby, who can always find fault with her. She is a satisfaction to Mr. Snagsby, who thinks it a charity to keep her. The law stationer's establishment is, in Guster's eyes, a temple of plenty and splendor. She believes the little drawing-room upstairs, always kept, as one may say, with its hair in papers and its pinafore on, to be the most elegant apartment in Christendom. The view it commands of Cook's Court at one end, not to mention a squint into Cursitor Street, and of Coavance's, the sheriff's officer's backyard at the other, she regards as a prospect of unequaled beauty. The portraits it displays in oil, and plenty of it too, of Mr. Snagsby looking at Mrs. Snagsby and of Mrs. Snagsby looking at Mr. Snagsby, are in her eyes as achievements of Raphael or Titian. Guster has some recompenses for her many privations. Mr. Snagsby refers everything not in the practical mysteries of the business to Mrs. Snagsby. She manages the money, reproaches the tax-gatherers, appoints the times and places of devotion on Sundays, licenses Mr. Snagsby's entertainments, and acknowledges no responsibility as to what she thinks fit to provide for dinner, insomuch that she is the high standard of comparison among the neighboring wives a long way down Chancery Lane on both sides, and even out in Holborn, who in any domestic passages of arms habitually call upon their husbands to look at the difference between the wives' position in Mrs. Snagsby's and the husbands' behavior in Mr. Snagsby's. Rumor, always flying bat-like about Cook's Court and skimming in and out at everybody's windows, does say that Mrs. Snagsby is jealous and inquisitive, and that Mr. Snagsby is sometimes worried out of house and home, and that if he had the spirit of a mouse he wouldn't stand it. It is even observed that the wives who quote him to their self-willed husbands as a shining example in reality look down upon him, and that nobody does so with greater superciliousness than one particular lady, whose lord is more than suspected of laying his umbrella on her as an instrument of correction. But these vague whisperings may arise from Mr. Snagsby's being in his way rather a meditative and poetical man, loving to walk in Staple Inn in the summertime, and to observe how countrified the sparrows and the leaves are, also to lounge about the Rolls Yard of a Sunday afternoon, and to remark, if in good spirits, that there were old times once, and that you find a stone coffin or two now under that chapel. He'll be bound, if he was to dig for it. He solaces his imagination, too, by thinking of the many chancellors and vices and masters of the rolls who are deceased, and he gets such a flavor of the country out of telling the two prentices how he has heard say that a brook as clear as crystal once ran right down the middle of Holborn, when turnstile really was a turnstile leading slap away into the meadows. Gets such a flavor of the country out of this that he never wants to go there. The day is closing in and the gas is lighted, but is not yet fully effective, for it is not quite dark. Mr. Snagsby, standing at his shop door looking up at the clouds, sees a crow who is out late skim westward over the slice of sky belonging to Cook's Court. The crow flies straight across Chancery Lane and Lincoln's Inn Garden into Lincoln's Inn Fields. Here, in a large house, formerly a house of state, lives Mr. Tulkinghorn. It is let off in sets of chambers now, and in those shrunken fragments of its greatness, lawyers lie like maggots in nuts. But its roomy staircases, passages, and antechambers still remain, and even its painted ceilings, where allegory in Roman helmet and celestial linen sprawls among balustrades and pillars, flowers, clouds, and big-legged boys, and makes the head ache, as would seem to be allegory's object always, more or less. Here, among his many boxes labeled with transcendent names, lives Mr. Tulkinghorn, when not spiritually at home in country houses where the great ones of the earth are bored to death. Here he is today, quiet at his table, an oyster of the old school whom nobody can open. Like as he is to look at, so is his apartment in the dusk of the present afternoon. Rusty, out of date, withdrawing from attention, able to afford it. Heavy, broad-backed, old-fashioned mahogany and horsehair chairs not easily lifted. Obsolete tables with spindle legs and dusty baize covers. Presentation prints of the holders of great titles in the last generation or the last but one environ him. A thick and dingy Turkey carpet muffles the floor where he sits, attended by 2 candles in old-fashioned silver candlesticks that give a very insufficient light to his large room. The titles on the backs of his books have retired into the binding. Everything that can have a lock has got one, no key is visible. Very few loose papers are about. He has some manuscript near him, but is not referring to it. With the round top of an inkstand and 2 broken bits of sealing wax, he is silently and slowly working out whatever train of indecision is in his mind. Now the inkstand top is in the middle, now the red bit of sealing wax, now the black bit. That's not it. Mr. Tulkinghorn must gather them all up and begin again. Here beneath the painted ceiling, with foreshortened allegory staring down at his intrusion as if it meant to swoop upon him, and he cutting it dead, Mr. Tulkinghorn has at once his house and office. He keeps no staff, only one middle-aged man, usually a little out at elbows, who sits in a high pew in the hall and is rarely overburdened with business. Mr. Tulkinghorn is not in a common way. He wants no clerks. He is a great reservoir of confidences, not to be so tapped. His clients want him. He is all in all. Drafts that he requires to be drawn are drawn by special pleaders in the temple on mysterious instructions. Fair copies that he requires to be made are made at the stationer's, expense being no consideration. The middle-aged man in the pew knows scarcely more of the affairs of the peerage than any crossing sweeper in Holborn. The red bit, the black bit, the inkstand top, the other inkstand top, the little sandbox. So you to the middle, you to the right, you to the left. This train of indecision must surely be worked out now or never. Now Mr. Tulkinghorn gets up, adjusts his spectacles, puts on his hat, puts the manuscript in his pocket, goes out, tells the middle-aged man out at elbows, "I shall be back presently." Very rarely tells him anything more explicit. Mr. Tulkinghorn goes as the crow came, not quite so straight, but nearly, to Cook's Court, Cursitor Street. To Snagsby's law stationers, deeds engrossed and copied, law writing executed in all its branches, and see. It is somewhere about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and a balmy fragrance of warm tea hovers in Cook's Court. It hovers about Snagsby's door. The hours are early there, dinner at 1:30 and supper at 9:30. Mr. Snagsby was about to descend into the subterranean regions to take tea when he looked out of his door just now and saw the crow, who was out late. Master at home. Guster is minding the shop, for the prentices take tea in the kitchen with Mr. and Mrs. Snagsby. Consequently, the robemaker's 2 daughters, combing their curls at the 2 glasses in the 2 second-floor windows of the opposite house, are not driving the 2 prentices to distraction as they fondly suppose, but are merely awakening the unprofitable admiration of Guster, whose hair won't grow and never would, and it is confidently thought never will. "Master at home," says Mr. Tulkinghorn. Master is at home, and Guster will fetch him. Guster disappears, glad to get out of the shop, which she regards with mingled dread and veneration as a storehouse of awful implements of the great torture of the law, a place not to be entered after the gas is turned off. Mr. Snagsby appears, greasy, warm, herbaceous, and chewing, bolts a bit of bread and butter, says, "Bless my soul, sir, Mr. Tulkinghorn. I want half a word with you, Snagsby." "Certainly, sir. Dear me, sir, why didn't you send your young man round for me? Pray walk into the back shop, sir." Snagsby has brightened in a moment. The confined room, strong of parchment grease, is warehouse, counting-house, and copying office. Mr. Tulkinghorn sits, facing round, on a stool at the desk. "Jarndyce and Jarndyce, Snagsby." "Yes, sir." Mr. Snagsby turns up the gas and coughs behind his hand, modestly anticipating profit. Mr. Snagsby, as a timid man, is accustomed to cough with a variety of expressions, and so to save words. You copied some affidavits in that cause for me lately. Yes, sir, we did. There was one of them, says Mr. Tulkinghorn, carelessly feeling tight, unopenable oyster of the old school, in the wrong coat pocket, the handwriting of which is peculiar and I rather like. As I happened to be passing and thought I had it about me, I looked in to ask you, but I haven't got it. No matter, any other time will do. Ah, here it is. I looked in to ask you who copied this. Who copied this, sir? Says Mr. Snagsby, taking it, laying it flat on the desk, and separating all the sheets at once with a twirl and a twist of the left hand peculiar to law stationers. We gave this out, sir. We were giving out rather a large quantity of work just at that time. I can tell you in a moment who copied it, sir, by referring to my book. Mr. Snagsby takes his book down from the safe, makes another bolt of the bit of bread and butter which seemed to have stopped short, eyes the affidavit aside, and brings his right forefinger traveling down a page of the book. Juby, Packer, Jarndyce. Jarndyce, here we are, sir, says Mr. Snagsby. To be sure, I might have remembered it. This was given out, sir, to a writer who lodges just over on the opposite side of the lane. Mr. Tulkinghorn has seen the entry, found it before the law stationer, read it while the forefinger was coming down the hill. What do you call him? Nemo, says Mr. Tulkinghorn. Nemo, sir, here it is, 42 folio. Given out on the Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, brought in on the Thursday morning at 9:30. Nemo, repeats Mr. Tulkinghorn. Nemo is Latin for no one. It must be English for someone, sir, I think, Mr. Snagsby submits with his deferential cough. It is a person's name. Here it is, you see, sir, 42 folio, given out Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, brought in Thursday morning, 9:30. The tail of Mr. Snagsby's eye becomes conscious of the head of Mrs. Snagsby looking in at the shop door to know what he means by deserting his tea. Mr. Snagsby addresses an explanatory cough to Mrs. Snagsby, as who should say, my dear, a customer. 9:30, sir, repeats Mr. Snagsby. Our lowriders who live by job work are a queer lot, and this may not be his name, but it's the name he goes by. I remember now, sir, that he gives it in a written advertisement he sticks up down at the Rule Office and the King's Bench Office and the Judges' Chambers and so forth. You know the kind of document, sir, wanting employ. Mr. Tulkinghorn glances through the little window at the back of Coavinses, the sheriff's officers, where lights shine in Coavinses' windows. Coavinses' coffee room is at the back, and the shadows of several gentlemen under a cloud loom cloudily upon the blinds. Mr. Snagsby takes the opportunity of slightly turning his head to glance over his shoulder at his little woman and to make apologetic motions with his mouth to this effect. Tulkinghorn rich influential. Have you given this man work before? Asks Mr. Tulkinghorn. Oh dear, yes, sir, work of yours. Thinking of more important matters, I forget where you said he lived. Across the lane, sir. In fact, he lodges at a— Mr. Snagsby makes another bolt, as if the bit of bread and butter were insurmountable, at a rag and bottle shop. Can you show me the place as I go back? With the greatest pleasure, sir. Mr. Snagsby pulls off his sleeves and his gray coat, pulls on his black coat, takes his hat from its peg. Oh, here is my little woman, he says aloud. My dear, will you be so kind as to tell one of the lads to look after the shop while I step across the lane with Mr. Tulkinghorn? Mrs. Snagsby, sir, I shan't be 2 minutes, my love. Mrs. Snagsby bends to the lawyer, retires behind the counter, peeps at them through the window blind, goes softly into the back office, refers to the entries in the book still lying open, is evidently curious. You will find that the place is rough, sir, says Mr. Snagsby, walking deferentially in the road and leaving the narrow pavement to the lawyer, and the party is very rough. But they're a wild lot in general, sir. The advantage of this particular man is that he never wants sleep. He'll go at it right on end if you want him to, as long as ever you like. It is quite dark now, and the gas lamps have acquired their full effect. Jostling against clerks going to post the day's letters, and against counsel and attorneys going home to dinner, and against plaintiffs and defendants and suitors of all sorts, and against the general crowd, in whose way the forensic wisdom of ages has interposed a million of obstacles to the transaction of the commonest business of life. Diving through law and equity, and through that kindred mystery, the street mud, which is made of nobody knows what and collects about us nobody knows whence or how, we only knowing in general that when there is too much of it we find it necessary to shovel it away. The lawyer and the law stationer come to a rag and bottle shop and general emporium of much disregarded merchandise, lying and being in the shadow of the wall of Lincoln's Inn, and kept, as is announced in paint, to all whom it may concern, by one crook. This is where he lives, sir, says the law stationer. This is where he lives, is it? Says the lawyer unconcernedly. Thank you. Are you not going in, sir? No, thank you, no, I am going on to the fields at present. Good evening, thank you. Mr. Snagsby lifts his hat and returns to his little woman and his tea. But Mr. Tulkinghorn does not go onto the fields at present. He goes a short way, turns back, comes again to the shop of Mr. Crook, and enters it straight. It is dim enough, with a blot-headed candle or so in the windows, and an old man and a cat sitting in the back part by a fire. The old man rises and comes forward with another blot-headed candle in his hand. "Pray is your lodger within?" "Male or female, sir?" says Mr. Crook. "Male, the person who does copying." Mr. Crook has eyed his man narrowly, knows him by sight, has an indistinct impression of his aristocratic repute. "Did you wish to see him, sir?" "Yes." "It's what I seldom do myself," says Mr. Crook with a grin. "Shall I call him down? But it's a weak chance if he'd come, sir." "I'll go up to him then," says Mr. Tulkinghorn. "Second floor, sir, take the candle, up there." Mr. Crook, with his cat beside him, stands at the bottom of the staircase looking after Mr. Tulkinghorn. "Hi, hi," he says when Mr. Tulkinghorn has nearly disappeared. The lawyer looks down over the handrail. The cat expands her wicked mouth and snarls at him. "Order, Lady Jane, behave yourself to visitors, my lady. You know what they say of my lodger," whispers Crook, going up a step or two. "What do they say of him?" "They say he has sold himself to the enemy, but you and I know better. He don't buy. I'll tell you what, though, my lodger is so black-humored and gloomy that I believe he'd as soon make that bargain as any other. Don't put him out, sir. That's my advice." Mr. Tulkinghorn, with a nod, goes on his way. He comes to the dark door on the second floor. He knocks, receives no answer, opens it, and accidentally extinguishes his candle in doing so. The air of the room is almost bad enough to have extinguished it if he had not. It is a small room, nearly black with soot and grease and dirt. In the rusty skeleton of a grate, pinched at the middle as if poverty had gripped it, a red coke fire burns low. In the corner by the chimney stand a deal table and a broken desk, a wilderness marked with a rain of ink. In another corner, a ragged old portmanteau on one of the two chairs serves for cabinet or wardrobe. No larger one is needed, for it collapses like the cheeks of a starved man. The floor is bare, except that one old mat, trodden to shreds of rope yarn, lies perishing upon the hearth. No curtain veils the darkness of the night, but the discolored shutters are drawn together, and through the two gaunt holes pierced in them, famine might be starring in the banshee of the man upon the bed. Or on a low bed opposite the fire, a confusion of dirty patchwork, lean-ribbed ticking, and coarse sacking. The lawyer, hesitating just within the doorway, sees a man. He lies there, dressed in shirt and trousers with bare feet. He has a yellow look in the spectral darkness of a candle that has guttered down until the whole length of its wick, still burning, has doubled over and left a tower of winding sheet above it. His hair is ragged, mingling with his whiskers and his beard, the latter ragged too and grown like the scum and mist around him in neglect. Foul and filthy as the room is, foul and filthy as the air is, it is not easy to perceive what fumes those are which most oppress the senses in it. But through the general sickliness and faintness and the odor of stale tobacco, there comes into the lawyer's mouth the bitter, vapid taste of opium. "Hallo, my friend," he cries, and strikes his iron candlestick against the door. He thinks he has awakened his friend. He lies a little turned away, but his eyes are surely open. "Hallo, my friend," he cries again. "Hallo, hallo." As he rattles on the door, the candle which has drooped so long goes out and leaves him in the dark, with the gaunt eyes in the shutters staring down upon the bed. Chapter 11. Our dear brother. A touch on the lawyer's wrinkled hand as he stands in the dark room, irresolute, makes him start and say, "What's that?" "It's me," returns the old man of the house, whose breath is in his ear. "Can't you wake him?" "No." "What have you done with your candle?" "It's gone out, here it is." Crook takes it, goes to the fire, stoops over the red embers, and tries to get a light. The dying ashes have no light to spare, and his endeavors are vain. Muttering after an ineffectual call to his lodger that he will go downstairs and bring a lighted candle from the shop, the old man departs. Mr. Tulkinghorn, for some new reason that he has, does not await his return in the room, but on the stairs outside. The welcome light soon shines upon the wall as Crook comes slowly up with his green-eyed cat following at his heels. "Does the man generally sleep like this?" inquired the lawyer in a low voice. "Hi, I don't know," says Crook, shaking his head and lifting his eyebrows. "I know next to nothing of his habits except that he keeps himself very close." Thus whispering, they both go in together. As the light goes in, the great eyes in the shutters, darkening, seem to close. Not so the eyes upon the bed. "God save us!" exclaims Mr. Tulkinghorn. "He is dead." Crook drops the heavy hand he has taken up so suddenly that the arm swings over the bedside. They look at one another for a moment. "Send for some doctor. Call for Miss Flight up the stairs, sir. Here's poison by the bed. Call out for Flight, will you?" says Crook with his lean hands spread out above the body like a vampire's wings. Mr. Tulkinghorn hurries to the landing and calls, "Miss Flight, Flight, make haste here, whoever you are, Flight." Crook follows him with his eyes, and while he is calling, finds opportunity to steal to the old portmanteau and steal back again. "Run, Flight, run, the nearest doctor, run." So Mr. Crook addresses a crazy little woman who is his female lodger, who appears and vanishes in a breath, who soon returns accompanied by a testy medical man brought from his dinner, with a broad, snuffy upper lip and a broad Scotch tongue. "I bless the hearts o' ye," says the medical man, looking up at them after a moment's examination. "He's just as dead as fairy." Mr. Tulkinghorn, standing by the old portmanteau, inquires if he has been dead any time. "Any time, sir," says the medical gentleman. "It's probable he will have been dead about 3 hours." "About that time, I should say," observes a dark young man on the other side of the bed. "Air you in the medical profession yourself, sir?" inquires the first. The dark young man says yes. "Then I'll just tack my departure," replies the other, "for I'm nae gude here," with which remark he finishes his brief attendance and returns to finish his dinner. The dark young surgeon passes the candle across and across the face and carefully examines the lowrider, who has established his pretensions to his name by becoming indeed no one. "I knew this person by sight very well," says he. "He has purchased opium of me for the last year and a half. Was anybody present related to him?" glancing round upon the 3 bystanders. "I was his landlord," grimly answers Crook, taking the candle from the surgeon's outstretched hand. "He told me once I was the nearest relation he had." "He has died," says the surgeon, "of an overdose of opium, there is no doubt. The room is strongly flavored with it. There is enough here now," taking an old teapot from Mr. Crook, "to kill a dozen people." "Do you think he did it on purpose?" asks Crook. "Took the overdose?" "Yes." Crook almost smacks his lips with the unction of a horrible interest. "I can't say. I should think it unlikely, as he has been in the habit of taking so much, but nobody can tell. He was very poor, I suppose." "I suppose he was. His room don't look rich," says Crook, who might have changed eyes with his cat as he casts his sharp glance around. "But I have never been in it since he had it, and he was too close to name his circumstances to me." "Did he owe you any rent?" "6 weeks. "He will never pay it," says the young man, resuming his examination. "It is beyond a doubt that he is indeed as dead as Pharaoh, and to judge from his appearance and condition, I should think it a happy release. Yet he must have been a good figure when a youth, and I dare say, good-looking." He says this not unfeelingly, while sitting on the bedstead's edge with his face towards that other face and his hand upon the region of the heart. "I recollect once thinking there was something in his manner, uncouth as it was, that denoted a fall in life. Was that so?" he continues, looking round. Crook replies, "You might as well ask me to describe the ladies whose heads of hair I have got in sacks downstairs, than that he was my lodger for a year and a half and lived, or didn't live, by law writing. I know no more of him." During this dialogue, Mr. Tulkinghorn has stood aloof by the old portmanteau, with his hands behind him, equally removed, to all appearance, from all 3 kinds of interest exhibited near the bed, from the young surgeon's professional interest in death, noticeable as being quite apart from his remarks on the deceased as an individual, from the old man's unction, and the little crazy woman's awe. His imperturbable face has been as inexpressive as his rusty clothes. One could not even say he has been thinking all this while. He has shown neither patience nor impatience, nor attention nor abstraction. He has shown nothing but his shell. As easily might the tone of a delicate musical instrument be inferred from its case as the tone of Mr. Tulkinghorn from his case. He now interposes, addressing the young surgeon in his unmoved, professional way. "I looked in here," he observes, "just before you with the intention of giving this deceased man, whom I never saw alive, some employment at his trade of copying. I had heard of him from my stationer, Snagsby of Cook's Court. Since no one here knows anything about him, it might be as well to send for Snagsby. Ah, to the little crazy woman who has often seen him in court, and whom he has often seen, and who proposes in fright dumb show to go for the law stationer. Suppose you do." While she is gone, the surgeon abandons his hopeless investigation and covers its subject with the patchwork counterpane. Mr. Crook and he interchange a word or two. Mr. Tulkinghorn says nothing, but stands ever near the old portmanteau. Mr. Snagsby arrives hastily in his gray coat and his black sleeves. Dear me," he says, "and it has come to this, has it, bless my soul." "Can you give the person of the house any information about this unfortunate creature, Snagsby?" inquires Mr. Tulkinghorn. He was in arrears with his rent, it seems, and he must be buried, you know. Well, sir, says Mr. Snagsby, coughing his apologetic cough behind his hand, I really don't know what advice I could offer, except sending for the beadle. I don't speak of advice, returns Mr. Tulkinghorn. I could advise. No one better, sir, I am sure, says Mr. Snagsby with his deferential cough. I speak of affording some clue to his connections, or to where he came from, or to anything concerning him. I assure you, sir, says Mr. Snagsby after prefacing his reply with his cough of general propitiation, that I no more know where he came from than I know. Where he has gone to, perhaps, suggests the surgeon to help him out. A pause, Mr. Tulkinghorn looking at the law stationer, Mr. Crook with his mouth open, looking for somebody to speak next. As to his connections, sir, says Mr. Snagsby, if a person was to say to me, Snagsby, here's £20,000 down, ready for you in the Bank of England if you'll only name one of 'em, I couldn't do it, sir. About a year and a half ago, to the best of my belief, at the time when he first came to lodge at the present rag and bottle shop. That was the time, says Crook with a nod. About a year and a half ago, says Mr. Snagsby, strengthened. He came into our place one morning after breakfast, and finding my little woman, which I named Mrs. Snagsby when I used that appellation in our shop, produced a specimen of his handwriting and gave her to understand that he was in want of copying work to do and was not put too fine a point upon it, a favorite apology for plain speaking with Mr. Snagsby, which he always offers with a sort of argumentative frankness, hard up. My little woman is not in general partial to strangers, particular not put too fine a point upon it when they want anything, but she was rather took by something about this person, whether by his being unshaved, or by his hair being in want of attention, or by what other ladies' reasons I leave you to judge, and she accepted of the specimen and likewise of the address. My little woman hasn't a good ear for names, proceeds Mr. Snagsby after consulting his cough of consideration behind his hand, and she considered Nemo equally the same as Nimrod, in consequence of which she got into a habit of saying to me at meals, Mr. Snagsby, you haven't found Nimrod any work yet, or Mr. Snagsby, why didn't you give that 8 and 30 Chancery folio and Jarndyce to Nimrod, or such like. And that is the way he gradually fell into job work at our place, and that is the most I know of him, except that he was a quick hand, and a hand not sparing of night work, and that if you gave him out, say, 5 and 40 folio on the Wednesday night, you would have it brought in on the Thursday morning. All of which, Mr. Snagsby concludes by politely motioning with his hat towards the bed, as much as to add, I have no doubt my honorable friend would confirm if you were in a condition to do it. Hadn't you better see, says Mr. Tulkinghorn to Crook, whether he had any papers that may enlighten you? There will be an inquest, and you will be asked the question. You can read. No, I can't, returns the old man with a sudden grin. Snagsby, says Mr. Tulkinghorn, look over the room for him. He will get into some trouble or difficulty otherwise. Being here, I'll wait if you make haste, and then I can testify on his behalf, if it should ever be necessary, that all was fair and right. If you will hold the candle for Mr. Snagsby, my friend, he'll soon see whether there is anything to help you. In the first place, here's an old portmanteau, sir, says Snagsby. Ah, to be sure, so there is. Mr. Tulkinghorn does not appear to have seen it before, though he is standing so close to it, and though there is very little else, heaven knows. The marine store merchant holds the light, and the law stationer conducts the search. The surgeon leans against the corner of the chimney-piece. Miss Flight peeps and trembles just within the door. The apt old scholar of the old school, with his dull black breeches tied with ribbons at the knees, his large black waistcoat, his long-sleeved black coat, and his wisp of limp white neckerchief tied in the bow the peerage knows so well, stands in exactly the same place and attitude. There are some worthless articles of clothing in the old portmanteau. There's a bundle of pawnbrokers' duplicates, those turnpike tickets on the road of poverty. There's a crumpled paper smelling of opium on which are scrawled rough memoranda as took such a day so many grains, took such another day so many more, begun some time ago, as if with the intention of being regularly continued, but soon left off. There are a few dirty scraps of newspapers, all referring to coroner's inquests. There's nothing else. They search the cupboard and the drawer of the ink-splashed table. There is not a morsel of an old letter or of any other writing in either. The young surgeon examines the dress on the loriter. A knife and some odd halfpence are all he finds. Mr. Snagsby's suggestion is the practical suggestion after all, and the beadle must be called in. So the little crazy lodger goes for the beadle, and the rest come out of the room. Don't leave the cat there, says the surgeon. That won't do. Mr. Crook therefore drives her out before him, and she goes furtively downstairs, winding her lithe tail and licking her lips. Good night, says Mr. Tulkinghorn, and goes home to allegory and meditation. By this time the news has got into the court. Groups of its inhabitants assemble to discuss the thing, and the outposts of the army of observation, principally boys, are pushed forward to Mr. Crook's window, which they closely invest. A policeman has already walked up to the room and walked down again to the door, where he stands like a tower, only condescending to see the boys at his base occasionally, but whenever he does see them, they quail and fall back. Mrs. Perkins, who has not been for some weeks on speaking terms with Mrs. Piper in consequence for an unpleasantness originating in young Perkins, having fetched young Piper a crack, renews her friendly intercourse on this auspicious occasion. The potboy at the corner, who is a privileged amateur as possessing official knowledge of life and having to deal with drunken men occasionally, exchanges confidential communications with the policeman and has the appearance of an impregnable youth, unassailable by truncheons and unconfinable in station houses. People talk across the court out of window, and bareheaded scouts come hurrying in from Chancery Lane to know what's the matter. The general feeling seems to be that it's a blessing Mr. Crook warn't made away with first, mingled with a little natural disappointment that he was not. In the midst of this sensation, the beadle arrives. The beadle, though generally understood in the neighborhood to be a ridiculous institution, is not without a certain popularity for the moment, if it were only as a man who is going to see the body. The policeman considers him an imbecile civilian, a remnant of the barbarous watchman times, but gives him admission as something that must be borne with until government shall abolish him. The sensation is heightened as the tidings spread from mouth to mouth that the beadle is on the ground and has gone in. By and by the beadle comes out, once more intensifying the sensation, which has rather languished in the interval. He is understood to be in want of witnesses for the inquest tomorrow who can tell the coroner and jury anything whatever respecting the deceased. Is immediately referred to innumerable people who can tell nothing whatever. Is made more imbecile by being constantly informed that Mrs. Green's son was a lowrider himself and knowed him better than anybody, which son of Mrs. Green's appears, on inquiry, to be at the present time aboard a vessel bound for China, 3 months out, but considered accessible by telegraph on application to the Lords of the Admiralty. Beadle goes into various shops and parlors, examining the inhabitants, always shutting the door first, and by exclusion, delay, and general idiocy exasperating the public. Policemen seem to smile to potboy. Public loses interest and undergoes reaction. Taunts the beadle in shrill, youthful voices with having boiled a boy, choruses fragments of a popular song to that effect, and importing that the boy was made into soup for the workhouse. Policeman at last finds it necessary to support the law and seize a vocalist, who is released upon the flight of the rest on condition of his getting out of this then, come, and cutting it, a condition he immediately observes. So the sensation dies off for the time, and the unmoved policeman, to whom a little opium more or less is nothing, with his shining hat, stiff stock, inflexible greatcoat, stout belt and bracelet, and all things fitting, pursues his lounging way with a heavy tread, beating the palms of his white gloves one against the other and stopping now and then at a street corner to look casually about for anything between a lost child and a murder. Under cover of the night, the feeble-minded beadle comes flitting about Chancery Lane with his summonses, in which every juror's name is wrongly spelt, and nothing rightly spelt but the beadle's own name, which nobody can read or wants to know. The summons is served and his witnesses forewarned. The beadle goes to Mr. Crook's to keep a small appointment he has made with certain paupers, who, presently arriving, are conducted upstairs, where they leave the great eyes in the shutter something new to stare at, in that last shape which earthly lodgings take for no one, and for every one. And all that night the coffin stands ready by the old portmanteau, and the lonely figure on the bed, whose path in life has lain through 45 years, lies there with no more track behind him that anyone can trace than a deserted infant. Next day the court is all alive, is like a fair, as Mrs. Perkins, more than reconciled to Mrs. Piper, says in amicable conversation with that excellent woman. The coroner is to sit in the first-floor room at the Saul's Arms, where the harmonic meetings take place twice a week, and where the chair is filled by a gentleman of professional celebrity, faced by Little Swills, the comic vocalist, who hopes, according to the bill in the window, that his friends will rally round him and support first-rate talent. The Saul's Arms does a brisk stroke of business all the morning. Even children so require sustaining under the general excitement that a pieman who has established himself for the occasion at the corner of the court says his brandy balls go off like smoke. What time the beadle, hovering between the door of Mr. Crook's establishment and the door of the Saul's Arms, shows the curiosity in his keeping to a few discreet spirits, and accepts the compliment of a glass of ale or so in return. At the appointed hour arrives the coroner, for whom the jurymen are waiting, and who is received with a salute of skittles from the good dry skittle ground attached to the Saul's Arms. The coroner frequents more public houses than any man alive. The smell of sawdust, beer, tobacco smoke, and spirits is inseparable in his vocation from death in its most awful shapes. He is conducted by the beadle and the landlord to the harmonic meeting room, where he puts his hat on the piano and takes a Windsor chair at the head of a long table formed of several short tables put together and ornamented with glutinous rings and endless involutions, made by pots and glasses. As many of the jury as can crowd together at the table sit there. The rest get among the spittoons and pipes or lean against the piano. Over the coroner's head is a small iron garland, the pendant handle of a bell, which rather gives the majesty of the court the appearance of going to be hanged presently. Call over and swear the jury. While the ceremony is in progress, sensation is created by the entrance of a chubby little man in a large shirt collar, with a moist eye and an inflamed nose, who modestly takes a position near the door as one of the general public, but seems familiar with the room too. A whisper circulates that this is little Swills. It is considered not unlikely that he will get up in imitation of the coroner, and make it the principal feature of the harmonic meeting in the evening. Well, gentlemen, the coroner begins. Silence there, will you, says the beadle, not to the coroner, though it might appear so. Well, gentlemen, resumes the coroner, you are impaneled here to inquire into the death of a certain man. Evidence will be given before you as to the circumstances attending that death, and you will give your verdict according to the skittles. They must be stopped, you know, beadle, evidence, and not according to anything else. The first thing to be done is to view the body. Make way there, cries the beadle. So they go out in a loose procession, something after the manner of a straggling funeral, and make their inspection in Mr. Crook's back second floor, from which a few of the jurymen retire pale and precipitately. The beadle is very careful that two gentlemen not very neat about the cuffs and buttons, for whose accommodation he has provided a special little table near the corner in the harmonic meeting room, should see all that is to be seen. For they are the public chroniclers of such inquiries by the line, and he is not superior to the universal human infirmity, but hopes to read in print what Mooney, the active and intelligent beadle of the district, said and did, and even aspires to see the name of Mooney as familiarly and patronizingly mentioned as the name of the hangman is, according to the latest examples. Little Swills is waiting for the coroner and jury on their return. Mr. Tulkinghorn also. Mr. Tulkinghorn is received with distinction and seated near the coroner between that high judicial officer, a bagatelle board, and the coal box. The inquiry proceeds. The jury learn how the subject of their inquiry died and learn no more about him. A very eminent solicitor is in attendance, gentlemen, says the coroner, who, I am informed, was accidentally present when discovery of the death was made. But he could only repeat the evidence you have already heard from the surgeon, the landlord, the lodger, and the law stationer, and it is not necessary to trouble him. Is anybody in attendance who knows anything more? Mrs. Piper pushed forward by Mrs. Perkins. Mrs. Piper sworn. Anastasia Piper, gentleman, married woman. Now, Mrs. Piper, what have you got to say about this? Why, Mrs. Piper has a good deal to say, chiefly in parentheses and without punctuation, but not much to tell. Mrs. Piper lives in the court, which her husband is a cabinet maker, and it has long been well beknown among the neighbors, counting from the day next but one before the half-baptizing of Alexander James, Piper aged 18 months and 4 days old on accounts of not being expected to live. Such was the sufferings, gentlemen, of that child in his gums as the plaintiff. So Mrs. Piper insists on calling the deceased, was reported to have sold himself. Thinks it was the plaintiff's heir in which that report originatin in. See the plaintiff often and considered as his heir was furious, and not to be allowed to go about some children being timid, and if doubted hopping Mrs. Perkins may be brought forward, for she is here and will do credit to her husband and herself and family. Has seen the plaintiff vexed and worrited by the children, for children there will ever be, and you cannot expect them, specially if of playful dispositions, to be Methuselahs, which he was not yourself. On accounts of this, in his dark looks has often dreamed as she see him take a pickaxe from his pocket and split Johnny's head, which the child knows not fear, and has repeatedly called after him close at his heels. Never however see the plaintiff take a pickaxe or any other weapon far from it. Has seen him hurry away when run and called after, as if not partial to children, and never see him speak to neither child nor grown person at any time, excepting the boy that sweeps the crossing down the lane over the way round the corner, which if he was here would tell you that he has been seen as speaking to him frequent. Says the coroner, is that boy here? Says the beadle, no, sir, he is not here. Says the coroner, go and fetch him then. In the absence of the active and intelligent, the coroner converses with Mr. Tulkinghorn. Oh, here's the boy, gentlemen. Here he is, very muddy, very hoarse, very ragged. Now, boy, but stop a minute. Caution, this boy must be put through a few preliminary paces. Name Joe, nothing else that he knows on. Don't know that everybody has two names, never heard of such a thing. Don't know that Joe is short for a longer name, thinks it long enough for him. He don't find no fault with it. Spell it, no, he can't spell it. No father, no mother, no friends, never been to school, what's home? Knows a broom's a broom and knows it's wicked to tell a lie. Don't recollect who told him about the broom or about the lie, but knows both. Can't exactly say what'll be done to him arter he's dead if he tells a lie to the gentleman here, but believes it'll be something worry bad to punish him and serve him right, and so he'll tell the truth. This won't do, gentlemen, says the coroner with a melancholy shake of the head. Don't you think you can receive his evidence, sir? Asks an attentive juryman. "Out of the question," says the coroner. "You have heard the boy. Can't exactly say won't do, you know. We can't take that in a court of justice, gentlemen. It's terrible depravity. Put the boy aside." Boy put aside, to the great edification of the audience, especially of Little Swills, the comic vocalist. "Now is there any other witness?" "No other witness." "Very well, gentlemen. Here's a man unknown, proved to have been in the habit of taking opium in large quantities for a year and a half, found dead of too much opium. If you think you have any evidence to lead you to the conclusion that he committed suicide, you will come to that conclusion. If you think it is a case of accidental death, you will find a verdict accordingly." Verdict accordingly, accidental death, no doubt. Gentlemen, you are discharged. Good afternoon. While the coroner buttons his greatcoat, Mr. Tulkinghorn and he give private audience to the rejected witness in a corner. That graceless creature only knows that the dead man, whom he recognized just now by his yellow face and black hair, was sometimes hooted and pursued about the streets. That one cold winter night when he, the boy, was shivering in a doorway near his crossing, the man turned to look at him and came back, and having questioned him and found that he had not a friend in the world, said, "Neither have I, not one," and gave him the price of a supper and a night's lodging. That the man had often spoken to him since and asked him whether he slept sound at night, and how he bore cold and hunger, and whether he ever wished to die, and similar strange questions. That when the man had no money, he would say in passing, "I am as poor as you today, Joe," but that when he had any, he had always, as the boy most heartily believes, been glad to give him some. "He was worry good to me," says the boy, wiping his eyes with his wretched sleeve. "When I see him a layin' so stretched out just now, I wished he could have heard me tell him so. He was worry good to me, he was." As he shuffles downstairs, Mr. Snagsby, lying in wait for him, puts a half-crown in his hand. "If you ever see me coming past your crossing with my little woman, I mean a lady," says Mr. Snagsby with his finger on his nose, "don't allude to it." For some little time the jurymen hang about the Saul's Arms colloquially. In the sequel, half a dozen are caught up in a cloud of pipe smoke that pervades the parlor of the Saul's Arms, 2 stroll to Hampstead, and 4 engage to go half-price to the play at night and top up with oysters. Little Swills is treated on several hands. Being asked what he thinks of the proceedings, characterizes them, his strength lying in a slangular direction, as a rummy start. The landlord of the Saul's Arms, finding Little Swills so popular, commends him highly to the jurymen and public, observing that for a song in character he don't know his equal, and that man's character wardrobe would fill a cart. Thus gradually the Saul's Arms melts into the shadowy night and then flares out of its strong and gas. The harmonic meeting hour arriving, the gentleman of professional celebrity takes the chair, is faced red-faced by Little Swills. Their friends rally round them and support first-rate talent. In the zenith of the evening, Little Swills says, "Gentlemen, if you'll permit me, I'll attempt a short description of a scene of real life that came off here today." Is much applauded and encouraged, goes out of the room as Swills, comes in as the coroner, not the least in the world like him, describes the inquest with recreative intervals of pianoforte accompaniment to the refrain, with his, the coroner's, tippy-tall lee doll, tippy-tall low doll, tippy-tall lee doll, d. The jingling piano at last is silent, and the harmonic friends rally round their pillows. Then there is rest around the lonely figure, now laid in its last earthly habitation, and it is watched by the gaunt eyes in the shutters through some quiet hours of night. If this forlorn man could have been prophetically seen lying here by the mother at whose breast he nestled, a little child with eyes upraised to her loving face and soft hands scarcely knowing how to close upon the neck to which it crept, what an impossibility the vision would have seemed. Oh, if in brighter days the now extinguished fire within him ever burned for one woman who held him in her heart, where is she, while these ashes are above the ground? It is anything but a night of rest at Mr. Snagsby's in Cook's Court, where Guster murders sleep by going, as Mr. Snagsby himself allows, not to put too fine a point upon it, out of 1 fit into 20. The occasion of this seizure is that Guster has a tender heart and a susceptible something that possibly might have been imagination, but for Tooting and her patron saint. Be it what it may, now, it was so direfully impressed at tea-time by Mr. Snagsby's account of the inquiry at which he had assisted that at supper-time she projected herself into the kitchen, preceded by a flying Dutch cheese, and fell into a fit of unusual duration, which she only came out of to go into another, and so on through a chain of fits with short intervals between, which she has pathetically availed herself by consuming them in entreaties to Mrs. Snagsby not to give her warning, when she quite comes to, and also in appeals to the whole establishment to lay her down on the stones and go to bed. Hence Mr. Snagsby, at last hearing the cock at the little dairy in Curster Street go into that disinterested ecstasy of his on the subject of daylight, says, drawing a long breath, though the most patient of men, "I thought you was dead, I am sure." What question this enthusiastic fowl supposes he settles when he strains himself to such an extent, or why he should thus crow, so men crow on various triumphant public occasions, however, about what cannot be of any moment to him, is his affair. It is enough that daylight comes, morning comes, noon comes. Then the active and intelligent, who has got into the morning papers as such, comes with his pauper company to Mr. Crook's, and bears off the body of our dear brother here departed to Hemden churchyard, pestiferous and obscene, whence malignant diseases are communicated to the bodies of our dear brothers and sisters who have not departed, while our dear brothers and sisters who hang about official backstairs, would to heaven they had departed, are very complacent and agreeable. Into a beastly scrap of ground which a Turk would reject as a savage abomination, and a Kaffir would shudder at, they bring our dear brother here departed to receive Christian burial. With houses looking on every side, save where a reeking little tunnel of a court gives access to the iron gate, with every villainy of life in action close on death, and every poisonous element of death in action close on life. Here they lower our dear brother down a foot or two, here sow him in corruption to be raised in corruption, an avenging ghost at many a sick bedside, a shameful testimony to future ages how civilization and barbarism walked this boastful island together. Come night, come darkness, for you cannot come too soon or stay too long by such a place as this. Come straggling lights into the windows of the ugly houses, and you who do iniquity therein, do it at least with this dread scene shut out. Come flame of gas, burning so sullenly above the iron gate on which the poisoned air deposits its witch ointment slimy to the touch. It is well that you should call to every passerby, look here. With the night comes a slouching figure through the tunnel court to the outside of the iron gate. It holds the gate with its hands and looks in between the bars, stands looking in for a little while. It then, with an old broom it carries, softly sweeps the step and makes the archway clean. It does so very busily and trimly, looks in again a little while, and so departs. Joe, is it thou? Well, well, though a rejected witness, who can't exactly say what will be done to him in greater hands than men, thou art not quite in outer darkness. There is something like a distant ray of light in thy muttered reason for this. He woes worry good to me, he woes. Chapter 12. On the watch. It is left off raining down in Lincolnshire at last, and Chesney Wold has taken heart. Mrs. Rouncewell is full of hospitable cares, for Sir Leicester and my lady are coming home from Paris. The fashionable intelligence has found it out and communicates the glad tidings to benighted England. It is also found out that they will entertain a brilliant and distinguished circle of the elite of the beau monde. The fashionable intelligence is weak in English, but a giant refreshed in French at the ancient and hospitable family seat in Lincolnshire. For the greater honor of the brilliant and distinguished circle, and of Chesney Wold into the bargain, the broken arch of the bridge in the park is mended, and the water, now retired within its proper limits and again spanned gracefully, makes a figure in the prospect from the house. The clear, cold sunshine glances into the brittle woods and approvingly beholds the sharp wind scattering the leaves and drying the moss. It glides over the park after the moving shadows of the clouds, and chases them and never catches them all day. It looks in at the windows and touches the ancestral portraits with bars and patches of brightness never contemplated by the painters. Athwart the picture of my lady, over the great chimney-piece, it throws a broad bend sinister of light that strikes down crookedly into the hearth and seems to rend it. Through the same cold sunshine and the same sharp wind, my lady and Sir Leicester in their traveling chariot, my lady's woman and Sir Leicester's man affectionate in the rumble, start for home. With a considerable amount of jingling and whip cracking, and many plunging demonstrations on the part of two bare-backed horses and two centaurs with glazed hats, jack boots and flowing monnets and tails, they rattle out of the yard of the Hotel Bristol and the place Vendome and canter between the sun and shadow checkered colonnade of the Rue de Rivoli and the garden of the ill-fated palace of a headless king and queen, off by the place of Concord and the Elysian fields and the gate of the Star out of Paris. Sooth to say, they cannot go away too fast, for even here my Lady Dedlock has been bored to death. Concert, assembly, opera, theater, drive, nothing is new to my lady under the worn-out heavens. Only last Sunday, when poor wretches were gay, within the walls playing with children among the clipped trees and the statues in the palace garden, walking a score abreast in the Elysian fields made more Elysian by performing dogs and wooden horses, between whiles filtering a few through the gloomy cathedral of Our Lady to say a word or two at the base of a pillar within flare of a rusty little gridiron full of gusty little tapers. Without the walls encompassing Paris with dancing, love-making, wine-drinking, tobacco-smoking, tomb-visiting, billiard, card and domino playing, quack-doctoring and much murderous refuse, animate and inanimate. Only last Sunday my lady, in the desolation of boredom and the clutch of giant despair, almost hated her own maid for being in spirits. She cannot, therefore, go too fast from Paris. Weariness of soul lies before her as it lies behind. Her Ariel has put a girdle of it round the whole earth, and it cannot be unclasped. But the imperfect remedy is always to fly from the last place where it has been experienced. Fling Paris back into the distance, then, exchanging it for endless avenues and cross avenues of wintry trees. And when next beheld, let it be some leagues away, with the gate of the star a white speck glittering in the sun, and the city a mere mound in a plain, 2 dark square towers rising out of it, and light and shadow descending on it aslant, like the angels in Jacob's dream. Sir Leicester is generally in a complacent state and rarely bored. When he has nothing else to do, he can always contemplate his own greatness. It is a considerable advantage to a man to have so inexhaustible a subject. After reading his letters, he leans back in his corner of the carriage and generally reviews his importance to society. "You have an unusual amount of correspondence this morning," says my lady after a long time. She is fatigued with reading, has almost read a page in 20 miles. "Nothing in it though, nothing whatever. I saw one of Mr. Tulkinghorn's long effusions, I think." "You see everything," says Sir Leicester with admiration. "Ha," sighs my lady, "he is the most tiresome of men." "He sends, I really beg your pardon, he sends," says Sir Leicester, selecting the letter and unfolding it. "A message to you. Are stopping to change horses as I came to his postscript drove it out of my memory." "I beg you'll excuse me," he said. Sir Leicester is so long in taking out his eyeglass and adjusting it that my lady looks a little irritated. He says, "In the matter of the right of way, I beg your pardon, that's not the place." He says, "Yes, here I have it." He says, "I beg my respectful compliments to my lady, who, I hope, has benefited by the change. Will you do me the favor to mention, as it may interest her, that I have something to tell her on her return in reference to the person who copied the affidavit in the Chancery suit, which so powerfully stimulated her curiosity. I have seen him." My lady, leaning forward, looks out of her window. "That's the message," observes Sir Leicester. "I should like to walk a little," says my lady, still looking out of her window. "Walk," repeats Sir Leicester in a tone of surprise. "I should like to walk a little," says my lady with unmistakable distinctness. "Please to stop the carriage." The carriage is stopped. The affectionate man alights from the rumble, opens the door, and lets down the steps, obedient to an impatient motion of my lady's hand. My lady alights so quickly and walks away so quickly that Sir Leicester, for all his scrupulous politeness, is unable to assist her, and is left behind. A space of a minute or two has elapsed before he comes up with her. She smiles, looks very handsome, takes his arm, lounges with him for a quarter of a mile, is very much bored, and resumes her seat in the carriage. The rattle and clatter continue through the greater part of 3 days, with more or less of bell jingling and whip cracking, and more or less plunging of centaurs and bare-backed horses. Their courtly politeness to each other at the hotels where they tarry is the theme of general admiration. "Though my lord is a little aged for my lady," says Madame, the hostess of the Golden Ape, "and though he might be her amiable father, one can see at a glance that they love each other." One observes my lord with his white hair, standing, hat in hand, to help my lady to and from the carriage. One observes my lady, how recognizant of my lord's politeness, with an inclination of her gracious head and the concession of her so genteel fingers. It is ravishing. The sea has no appreciation of great men, but knocks them about like the small fry. It is habitually hard upon Sir Leicester, whose countenance it greenly models in the manner of sage cheese, and in whose aristocratic system it effects a dismal revolution. It is the radical of nature to him. Nevertheless, his dignity gets over it after stopping to refit, and he goes on with my lady for Chesney Wold, lying only one night in London on the way to Lincolnshire. Through the same cold sunlight, colder as the day declines, and through the same sharp wind, sharper as the separate shadows of bare trees gloom together in the woods, and as the ghosts walk, touched at the western corner by a pile of fire in the sky, resigns itself to coming night, they drive into the park. The rooks, swinging in their lofty houses in the elm tree avenue, seem to discuss the question of the occupancy of the carriage as it passes underneath, some agreeing that Sir Leicester and my lady are come down, some arguing with malcontents who won't admit it, now all consenting to consider the question disposed of, now all breaking out again in violent debate, incited by one obstinate and drowsy bird who will persist in putting in a last contradictory croak. Leaving them to swing and caw, the traveling chariot rolls on to the house, where fires gleam warmly through some of the windows, though not through so many as to give an inhabited expression to the darkening mass of front. But the brilliant and distinguished circle will soon do that. Mrs. Rouncewell is in attendance and receives Sir Leicester's customary shake of the hand with a profound curtsy. "How do you do, Mrs. Rouncewell? I am glad to see you." "I hope I have the honor of welcoming you in good health, Sir Leicester." "In excellent health, Mrs. Rouncewell." "My lady is looking charmingly well," says Mrs. Rouncewell with another curtsy. My lady signifies, without profuse expenditure of words, that she is as wearily well as she can hope to be. But Rosa is in the distance, behind the housekeeper, and my lady, who has not subdued the quickness of her observation, whatever else she may have conquered, asks, "Who is that girl?" A young scholar of mine, my lady, Rosa. Come here, Rosa, Lady Dedlock beckons her with even an appearance of interest. Why, do you know how pretty you are, child? She says, touching her shoulder with her two forefingers. Rosa, very much abashed, says, no, if you please, my lady, and glances up and glances down and don't know where to look but looks all the prettier. How old are you? 19, my lady. 19, repeats my lady thoughtfully. Take care they don't spoil you by flattery. Yes, my lady. My lady taps her dimpled cheek with the same delicate gloved fingers and goes on to the foot of the oak staircase, where Sir Leicester pauses for her as her nightly escort. A staring old Dedlock in a panel, as large as life and as dull, looks as if he didn't know what to make of it, which was probably his general state of mind in the days of Queen Elizabeth. That evening in the housekeeper's room, Rosa can do nothing but murmur Lady Dedlock's praises. She is so affable, so graceful, so beautiful, so elegant, has such a sweet voice and such a thrilling touch that Rosa can feel it yet. Mrs. Rouncewell confirms all this, not without personal pride, reserving only the one point of affability. Mrs. Rouncewell is not quite sure as to that. Heaven forbid that she should say a syllable in dispraise of any member of that excellent family, above all of my lady, whom the whole world admires. But if my lady would only be a little more free, not quite so cold and distant, Mrs. Rouncewell thinks she would be more affable. "'Tis almost a pity," Mrs. Rouncewell adds, only almost, because it borders on impiety to suppose that anything could be better than it is in such an express dispensation as the Dedlock affairs, that my lady has no family. If she had had a daughter now, a grown young lady, to interest her, I think she would have had the only kind of excellence she wants. Might not that have made her still more proud, grandmother, says Watt, who has been home and come back again, he is such a good grandson. More and most, my dear, returns the housekeeper with dignity, are words it's not my place to use, nor so much as to hear applied to any drawback on my lady. I beg your pardon, grandmother, but she is proud, is she not? If she is, she has reason to be. The Dedlock family have always reason to be. Well, says Watt, it's to be hoped they line out of their prayer books a certain passage for the common people about pride and vainglory. Forgive me, grandmother, only a joke. Sir Leicester and Lady Dedlock, my dear, are not fit subjects for joking. Sir Leicester is no joke by any means, says Watt, and I humbly ask his pardon. I suppose, grandmother, that even with the family and their guests down here, there is no objection to my prolonging my stay at the Dedlock Arms for a day or two, as any other traveler might. Surely none in the world, child. I am glad of that, says Watt, because I have an inexpressible desire to extend my knowledge of this beautiful neighborhood. He happens to glance at Rosa, who looks down and is very shy indeed. But according to the old superstition, it should be Rosa's ears that burn and not her fresh bright cheeks, for my lady's maid is holding forth about her at this moment with surpassing energy. My lady's maid is a Frenchwoman of 32, from somewhere in the southern country about Avignon and Marseille, a large-eyed brown woman with black hair who would be handsome but for a certain feline mouth and general uncomfortable tightness of face, rendering the jaws too eager and the skull too prominent. There is something indefinably keen and wan about her anatomy, and she has a watchful way of looking out of the corners of her eyes without turning her head which could be pleasantly dispensed with, especially when she is in an ill humor and near knives. Through all the good taste of her dress and little adornments, these objections so express themselves that she seems to go about like a very neat she-wolf imperfectly tamed. Besides being accomplished in all the knowledge appertaining to her post, she is almost an Englishwoman in her acquaintance with the language. Consequently, she is in no want of words to shower upon Rosa for having attracted my lady's attention, and she pours them out with such grim ridicule as she sits at dinner that her companion, the affectionate man, is rather relieved when she arrives at the spoon stage of that performance. Ah ha ha, she Hortense, been in my lady's service since 5 years and always kept at the distance, and this doll, this puppet, caressed, absolutely caressed by my lady on the moment of her arriving at the house. Ha ha ha, and do you know how pretty you are, child? No, my lady, you are right there. And how old are you, child? And take care they do not spoil you by flattery, child. Oh, how droll, it is the best thing altogether. In short, it is such an admirable thing that Mademoiselle Hortense can't forget it. But at meals for days afterwards, even among her countrywomen and others attached in like capacity to the troop of visitors, relapses into silent enjoyment of the joke, an enjoyment expressed in her own convivial manner by an additional tightness of face, thin elongation of compressed lips, and sidewise look, which intense appreciation of humor is frequently reflected in my lady's mirrors when my lady is not among them. All the mirrors in the house are brought into action now, many of them after a long blank. They reflect handsome faces, simpering faces, youthful faces, faces of 70 that will not submit to be old. The entire collection of faces that have come to pass a January week or two at Chesney Wold, and which the fashionable intelligence, a mighty hunter before the Lord, hunts with a keen scent, from their breaking cover at the court of St. James's to their being run down to death. The place in Lincolnshire is all alive. By day guns and voices are heard ringing in the woods, horsemen and carriages enliven the park roads, servants and hangers-on pervade the village and the Dedlock Arms. Seen by night from distant openings in the trees, the row of windows in the long drawing-room where my lady's picture hangs over the great chimney-piece is like a row of jewels set in a black frame. On Sunday, the chill little church is almost warmed by so much gallant company, and the general flavor of the Dedlock dust is quenched in delicate perfumes. The brilliant and distinguished circle comprehends within it no contracted amount of education, sense, courage, honor, beauty, and virtue. Yet there is something a little wrong about it in despite of its immense advantages. What can it be? Dandyism. There is no King George IV now, more the pity to set the dandy fashion. There are no clear starched jack-towel neckcloths, no short-waisted coats, no false calves, no stays. There are no caricatures now of effeminate exquisites so arrayed, swooning in opera boxes with excessive delight and being revived by other dainty creatures poking long-necked scent bottles at their noses. There is no beau whom it takes 4 men at once to shake into his buckskins, or who goes to see all the executions, or who is troubled with the self-reproach of having once consumed a pea. But is there dandyism in the brilliant and distinguished circle notwithstanding? Dandyism of a more mischievous sort that has got below the surface, and is doing less harmless things than jack-toweling itself and stopping its own digestion, to which no rational person need particularly object. Why, yes, it cannot be disguised. There are at Chesney Wold this January week some ladies and gentlemen of the newest fashion who have set up a dandyism, in religion for instance, who in mere lackadaisical want of an emotion have agreed upon a little dandy talk about the vulgar wanting faith in things in general, meaning in the things that have been tried and found wanting, as though a low fellow should unaccountably lose faith in a bad shilling after finding it out. Who would make the vulgar very picturesque and faithful by putting back the hands upon the clock of time and cancelling a few hundred years of history. There are also ladies and gentlemen of another fashion, not so new but very elegant, who have agreed to put a smooth glaze on the world and to keep down all its realities, for whom everything must be languid and pretty, who have found out the perpetual stoppage, who are to rejoice at nothing and be sorry for nothing, who are not to be disturbed by ideas, on whom even the fine arts, attending in powder and walking backward like the Lord Chamberlain, must array themselves in the milliners' and tailors' patterns of past generations and be particularly careful not to be in earnest or to receive any impress from the moving age. Then there is my Lord Bootle, of considerable reputation with his party, who has known what office is and who tells Sir Leicester Dedlock with much gravity after dinner that he really does not see to what the present age is tending. A debate is not what a debate used to be, the House is not what the House used to be, even a cabinet is not what it formerly was. He perceives with astonishment that supposing the present government to be overthrown, the limited choice of the Crown in the formation of a new ministry would lie between Lord Coodle and Sir Thomas Doodle, supposing it to be impossible for the Duke of Foodle to act with Goodle, which may be assumed to be the case in consequence of the breach arising out of that affair with Hoodle. Then giving the Home Department and the leadership of the House of Commons to Joodle, the Exchequer to Coodle, the Colonies to Loodle, and the Foreign Office to Moodle, what are you to do with Noodle? You can't offer him the presidency of the Council, that is reserved for Poodle. You can't put him in the woods and forests, that is hardly good enough for Quoodle. What follows? That the country is shipwrecked, lost, and gone to pieces, as is made manifest to the patriotism of Sir Leicester Dedlock, because you can't provide for Noodle. On the other hand, the Right Honourable William Buffy, MP, contends across the table with someone else that the shipwreck of the country, about which there is no doubt, it is only the manner of it that is in question, is attributable to Cuffy. If you had done with Cuffy what you ought to have done when he first came into Parliament, and had prevented him from going over to Duffy, you would have got him into alliance with Fuffy. You would have had with you the weight attaching as a smart debater to Guffy. You would have brought to bear upon the elections the wealth of Huffy. You would have got him for 3 counties Juffy, Cuffy, and Luffy. And you would have strengthened your administration by the official knowledge and the business habits of Muffy. All this instead of being, as you now are, dependent on the mere caprice of Puffy. As to this point, and as to some minor topics, there are differences of opinion, but it is perfectly clear to the brilliant and distinguished circle, all round, that nobody is in question but Boodle and his retinue and Buffy and his retinue. These are the great actors for whom the stage is reserved. People there are, no doubt, a certain large number of supernumeraries who are to be occasionally addressed and relied upon for shouts and choruses as on the theatrical stage. But Boodle and Buffy, their followers and families, their heirs, executors, administrators, and assigns, are the born first actors, managers, and leaders, and no others can appear upon the scene forever and ever. In this, too, there is perhaps more dandyism at Chesney Wold than the brilliant and distinguished circle will find good for itself in the long run. For it is, even with the stillest and politest circles, as with the circle the necromancer draws around him, very strange appearances may be seen in active motion outside, with this difference that being realities and not phantoms, there is the greater danger of their breaking in. Chesney Wold is quite full anyhow, so full that a burning sense of injury arises in the breasts of ill-lodged ladies' maids and is not to be extinguished. Only one room is empty. It is a turret chamber of the third order of merit, plainly but comfortably furnished and having an old-fashioned business air. It is Mr. Tulkinghorn's room and is never bestowed on anybody else, for he may come at any time. He is not come yet. It is his quiet habit to walk across the park from the village in fine weather, to drop into this room as if he had never been out of it since he was last seen there, to request a servant to inform Sir Leicester that he has arrived in case he should be wanted, and to appear 10 minutes before dinner in the shadow of the library door. He sleeps in his turret with a complaining flagstaff over his head, and has some leads outside on which, any fine morning when he is down here, his black figure may be seen walking before breakfast like a larger species of rook. Every day before dinner, my lady looks for him in the dusk of the library, but he is not there. Every day at dinner, my lady glances down the table for the vacant place that would be waiting to receive him if he had just arrived, but there is no vacant place. Every night my lady casually asks her maid, "Is Mr. Tulkinghorn come?" Every night the answer is, "No, my lady, not yet." One night, while having her hair undressed, my lady loses herself in deep thought after this reply until she sees her own brooding face in the opposite glass and a pair of black eyes curiously observing her. "Be so good as to attend," says my lady then, addressing the reflection of Hortense, "to your business. You can contemplate your beauty at another time." "Pardon, it was your ladyship's beauty." "That," says my lady, "you needn't contemplate at all." At length one afternoon a little before sunset, when the bright groups of figures which have for the last hour or two enlivened the Ghost's Walk are all dispersed, and only Sir Leicester and my lady remain upon the terrace, Mr. Tulkinghorn appears. He comes towards them at his usual methodical pace, which is never quickened, never slackened. He wears his usual expressionless mask, if it be a mask, and carries family secrets in every limb of his body and every crease of his dress. Whether his whole soul is devoted to the great or whether he yields them nothing beyond the services he sells is his personal secret. He keeps it as he keeps the secrets of his clients. He is his own client in that matter and will never betray himself. "How do you do, Mr. Tulkinghorn?" says Sir Leicester, giving him his hand. Mr. Tulkinghorn is quite well, Sir Leicester is quite well, my lady is quite well, all highly satisfactory. The lawyer, with his hands behind him, walks at Sir Leicester's side along the terrace. My lady walks upon the other side. "We expected you before," says Sir Leicester, a gracious observation. "As much as to say, Mr. Tulkinghorn, we remember your existence when you are not here to remind us of it by your presence. We bestow a fragment of our minds upon you, sir, you see." Mr. Tulkinghorn, comprehending it, inclines his head and says he is much obliged. "I should have come down sooner," he explains, "but that I have been much engaged with those matters in the several suits between yourself and Boythorn." "A man of a very ill-regulated mind," observes Sir Leicester with severity, "an extremely dangerous person in any community, a man of a very low character of mind." "He is obstinate," says Mr. Tulkinghorn. "It is natural to such a man to be so," says Sir Leicester, looking most profoundly obstinate himself. "I am not at all surprised to hear it." "The only question is," pursues the lawyer, "whether you will give up anything." "No, sir," replies Sir Leicester, "nothing I give up. I don't mean anything of importance, that, of course, I know you would not abandon. I mean any minor point." "Mr. Tulkinghorn," returns Sir Leicester, "there can be no minor point between myself and Mr. Boythorn. If I go farther and observe that I cannot readily conceive how any right of mine can be a minor point, I speak not so much in reference to myself as an individual as in reference to the family position I have it in charge to maintain." Mr. Tulkinghorn inclines his head again. "I have now my instructions," he says. "Mr. Boythorn will give us a good deal of trouble." "It is the character of such a mind, Mr. Tulkinghorn," Sir Leicester interrupts him, "to give trouble. An exceedingly ill-conditioned, levelling person. A person who 50 years ago would probably have been tried at the Old Bailey for some demagogue proceeding and severely punished, if not, adds Sir Leicester after a moment's pause, if not hanged, drawn, and quartered. Sir Leicester appears to discharge his stately breast of a burden in passing this capital sentence, as if it were the next satisfactory thing to having the sentence executed. "But night is coming on," says he, "and my lady will take cold. My dear, let us go in." As they turn towards the hall door, Lady Dedlock addresses Mr. Tulkinghorn for the first time. "You sent me a message respecting the person whose writing I happened to inquire about. It was like you to remember the circumstance. I had quite forgotten it. Your message reminded me of it again. I can't imagine what association I had with a hand like that, but I surely had some." "You had some," Mr. Tulkinghorn repeats. "Oh, yes," returns my lady carelessly. "I think I must have had some. And did you really take the trouble to find out the writer of that actual thing? What is it? Affidavit?" "Yes." "How very odd." They pass into a somber breakfast room on the ground floor, lighted in the day by two deep windows. It is now twilight. The fire glows brightly on the paneled wall and palely on the window glass, where, through the cold reflection of the blaze, the colder landscape shudders in the wind and a gray mist creeps along, the only traveler besides the waste of clouds. My lady lounges in a great chair in the chimney corner, and Sir Leicester takes another great chair opposite. The lawyer stands before the fire with his hand out at arm's length, shading his face. He looks across his arm at my lady. "Yes," he says, "I inquired about the man and found him, and what is very strange, I found him. Not to be any out-of-the-way person, I am afraid," Lady Dedlock languidly anticipates. "I found him dead." "Oh, dear me," remonstrated Sir Leicester, not so much shocked by the fact as by the fact of the fact being mentioned. "I was directed to his lodging, a miserable, poverty-stricken place, and I found him dead." "You will excuse me, Mr. Tulkinghorn," observed Sir Leicester. "I think the less said." "Pray, Sir Leicester, let me hear the story out. It is my lady speaking. It is quite a story for twilight. How very shocking, dead." Mr. Tulkinghorn reasserts it by another inclination of his head, whether by his own hand. "Upon my honor," cries Sir Leicester, "really." "Do let me hear the story," says my lady. "Whatever you desire, my dear, but I must say—" "No, you mustn't say. Go on, Mr. Tulkinghorn." Sir Leicester's gallantry concedes the point, though he still feels that to bring this sort of squalor among the upper classes is really. "I was about to say," resumes the lawyer with undisturbed calmness, "that whether he had died by his own hand or not, it was beyond my power to tell you. I should amend that phrase, however, by saying that he had unquestionably died of his own act, though whether by his own deliberate intention or by mischance can never certainly be known. The coroner's jury found that he took the poison accidentally." "And what kind of man," my lady asks, "was this deplorable creature?" "Very difficult to say," returns the lawyer, shaking his head. "He had lived so wretchedly and was so neglected, with his gypsy color and his wild black hair and beard, that I should have considered him the commonest of the common. The surgeon had a notion that he had once been something better, both in appearance and condition." "What did they call the wretched being?" "They called him what he had called himself, but no one knew his name." "Not even anyone who had attended on him?" "No one had attended on him. He was found dead. In fact, I found him." "Without any clue to anything more?" "Without any. There was," says the lawyer meditatively, "an old portmanteau, but no, there were no papers." During the utterance of every word of this short dialogue, Lady Dedlock and Mr. Tulkinghorn, without any other alteration in their customary deportment, have looked very steadily at one another, as was natural, perhaps, in the discussion of so unusual a subject. Sir Leicester has looked at the fire, with the general expression of the Dedlock on the staircase. The story being told, he renews his stately protest, saying that as it is quite clear that no association in my lady's mind can possibly be traceable to this poor wretch, unless he was a begging letter writer, he trusts to hear no more about a subject so far removed from my lady's station. "Certainly a collection of horrors," says my lady, gathering up her mantles and furs, "but they interest one for the moment. Have the kindness, Mr. Tulkinghorn, to open the door for me." Mr. Tulkinghorn does so with deference and holds it open while she passes out. She passes close to him with her usual fatigued manner and insolent grace. They meet again at dinner, again next day, again for many days in succession. Lady Dedlock is always the same exhausted deity, surrounded by worshippers and terribly liable to be bored to death, even while presiding at her own shrine. Mr. Tulkinghorn is always the same speechless repository of noble confidences, so oddly out of place and yet so perfectly at home. They appear to take as little note of one another as any two people enclosed within the same walls could. But whether each ever more watches and suspects the other, ever more mistrustful of some great reservation, whether each is ever more prepared at all points for the other and never to be taken unawares, what each would give to know how much the other knows, all this is hidden for the time in their own hearts. Chapter 13. Esther's narrative. We held many consultations about what Richard was to be, first without Mr. Jarndyce as he had requested, and afterwards with him, but it was a long time before we seemed to make progress. Richard said he was ready for anything. When Mr. Jarndyce doubted whether he might not already be too old to enter the Navy, Richard said he had thought of that, and perhaps he was. When Mr. Jarndyce asked him what he thought of the Army, Richard said he had thought of that too, and it wasn't a bad idea. When Mr. Jarndyce advised him to try and decide within himself whether his old preference for the sea was an ordinary boyish inclination or a strong impulse, Richard answered, well, he really had tried very often, and he couldn't make out. How much of this indecision of character, Mr. Jarndyce said to me, is chargeable on that incomprehensible heap of uncertainty and procrastination on which he has been thrown from his birth, I don't pretend to say, but that chancery among its other sins is responsible for some of it, I can plainly see. It has engendered or confirmed in him a habit of putting off, and trusting to this, that, and the other chance without knowing what chance, and dismissing everything as unsettled, uncertain, and confused. The character of much older and steadier people may be even changed by the circumstances surrounding them. It would be too much to expect that a boy, in its formation, should be the subject of such influences and escape them. I felt this to be true, though if I may venture to mention what I thought besides, I thought it much to be regretted that Richard's education had not counteracted those influences or directed his character. He had been 8 years at a public school and had learnt, I understood, to make Latin verses of several sorts in the most admirable manner. But I never heard that it had been anybody's business to find out what his natural bent was, or where his failings lay, or to adapt any kind of knowledge to him. He had been adapted to the verses, and had learnt the art of making them to such perfection that if he had remained at school until he was of age, I suppose he could only have gone on making them over and over again, unless he had enlarged his education by forgetting how to do it. Still, although I had no doubt that they were very beautiful and very improving and very sufficient for a great many purposes of life, and always remembered all through life, I did doubt whether Richard would not have profited by someone studying him a little, instead of his studying them quite so much. To be sure, I knew nothing of the subject, and do not even now know whether the young gentlemen of classic Rome or Greece made verses to the same extent, or whether the young gentlemen of any country ever did. I haven't the least idea, said Richard, musing, what I had better be, except that I am quite sure I don't want to go into the church. It's a toss-up. You have no inclination in Mr. Kenge's way, suggested Mr. Jarndyce. I don't know that, sir, replied Richard. I am fond of boating. Articled clerks go a good deal on the water. It's a capital profession. Surgeon, suggested Mr. Jarndyce. That's the thing, sir, cried Richard. I doubt if he had ever once thought of it before. That's the thing, sir, repeated Richard with the greatest enthusiasm. We have got it at last, MRCS. He was not to be laughed out of it, though he laughed at it heartily. He said he had chosen his profession, and the more he thought of it, the more he felt that his destiny was clear. The art of healing was the art of all others for him. Mistrusting that he only came to this conclusion because, having never had much chance of finding out for himself what he was fitted for, and having never been guided to the discovery, he was taken by the newest idea and was glad to get rid of the trouble of consideration. I wondered whether the Latin verses often ended in this, or whether Richard was a solitary case. Mr. Jarndyce took great pains to talk with him seriously and to put it to his good sense not to deceive himself in so important a matter. Richard was a little grave after these interviews, but invariably told Ada and me that it was all right, and then began to talk about something else. By heaven, cried Mr. Boythorn, who interested himself strongly in the subject, though I need not say that, for he could do nothing weakly, I rejoice to find a young gentleman of spirit and gallantry devoting himself to that noble profession. The more spirit there is in it, the better for mankind, and the worse for those mercenary taskmasters and low tricksters who delight in putting that illustrious art at a disadvantage in the world. By all that is base and despicable, cried Mr. Boythorn, The treatment of surgeons aboard ship is such that I would submit the legs, both legs, of every member of the Admiralty Board to a compound fracture, and render it a transportable offense in any qualified practitioner to set them if the system were not wholly changed in 8 and 40 hours. Wouldn't you give them a week? Asked Mr. Jarndyce. No, cried Mr. Boythorn firmly, not on any consideration 8 and 40 hours. As to corporations, parishes, vestry boards, and similar gatherings of jolter-headed clods who assemble to exchange such speeches that, by heaven, they ought to be worked in quicksilver mines for the short remainder of their miserable existence, if it were only to prevent their detestable English from contaminating a language spoken in the presence of the sun, as to those fellows who merely take advantage of the ardor of gentlemen in the pursuit of knowledge, to recompense the inestimable services of the best years of their lives, their long study, and their expensive education with pittances too small for the acceptance of clerks, I would have the necks of every one of them wrung, and their skulls arranged in Surgeons' Hall for the contemplation of the whole profession, in order that its younger members might understand from actual measurement, in early life, how thick skulls may become. He wound up this vehement declaration by looking round upon us with a most agreeable smile and suddenly thundering, "Ha, ha, ha," over and over again, until anybody else might have been expected to be quite subdued by the exertion. As Richard still continued to say that he was fixed in his choice after repeated periods for consideration had been recommended by Mr. Jarndyce and had expired, and he still continued to assure Ada and me in the same final manner that it was all right, it became advisable to take Mr. Kenge into counsel. Mr. Kenge therefore came down to dinner one day and leaned back in his chair and turned his eyeglasses over and over and spoke in a sonorous voice, and did exactly what I remembered to have seen him do when I was a little girl. "Ah," said Mr. Kenge, "yes, well, a very good profession, Mr. Jarndyce, a very good profession. The course of study and preparation requires to be diligently pursued," observed my guardian with a glance at Richard. "Oh, no doubt," said Mr. Kenge, "diligently. But that being the case more or less with all pursuits that are worth much," said Mr. Jarndyce, "it is not a special consideration which another choice would be likely to escape." "Truly," said Mr. Kenge, "and Mr. Richard Carstone, who has so meritoriously acquitted himself in the shall I say the classic shades, in which his youth had been passed, will, no doubt, apply the habits, if not the principles and practice, of versification in that tongue in which a poet was said, unless I mistake, to be born, not made, to the more eminently practical field of action on which he enters." "You may rely upon it," said Richard in his offhand manner, "that I shall go at it and do my best." "Very well, Mr. Jarndyce," said Mr. Kenge, gently nodding his head. "Really, when we are assured by Mr. Richard that he means to go at it and to do his best," nodding feelingly and smoothly over those expressions, "I would submit to you that we have only to inquire into the best mode of carrying out the object of his ambition. Now, with reference to placing Mr. Richard with some sufficiently eminent practitioner, is there anyone in view at present?" "No one, Rick, I think," said my guardian. "No one, sir," said Richard. "Quite so," observed Mr. Kenge. "As to situation now, is there any particular feeling on that head?" "And no," said Richard. "Quite so," observed Mr. Kenge again. "I should like a little variety," said Richard. "I mean a good range of experience." "Very requisite, no doubt," returned Mr. Kenge. "I think this may be easily arranged, Mr. Jarndyce. We have only in the first place to discover a sufficiently eligible practitioner, and as soon as we make our want, and shall I add our ability to pay a premium, known, our only difficulty will be in the selection of one from a large number. We have only in the second place to observe those little formalities which are rendered necessary by our time of life and our being under the guardianship of the court. We shall soon be, shall I say, in Mr. Richard's own light-hearted manner, going at it to our heart's content." "It is a coincidence," said Mr. Kenge with a tinge of melancholy in his smile, "one of those coincidences which may or may not require an explanation beyond our present limited faculties, that I have a cousin in the medical profession. He might be deemed eligible by you and might be disposed to respond to this proposal. I can answer for him as little as for you, but he might." As this was an opening in the prospect, it was arranged that Mr. Kenge should see his cousin. And as Mr. Jarndyce had before proposed to take us to London for a few weeks, it was settled next day that we should make our visit at once and combine Richard's business with it. Mr. Boythorn leaving us within a week, we took up our abode at a cheerful lodging near Oxford Street over an upholsterer's shop. London was a great wonder to us, and we were out for hours and hours at a time, seeing the sights which appeared to be less capable of exhaustion than we were. We made the round of the principal theaters, too, with great delight, and saw all the plays that were worth seeing. I mention this because it was at the theater that I began to be made uncomfortable again by Mr. Guppy. I was sitting in front of the box one night with Ada, and Richard was in the place he liked best, behind Ada's chair. When happening to look down into the pit, I saw Mr. Guppy, with his hair flattened down upon his head and woe depicted in his face, looking up at me. I felt all through the performance that he never looked at the actors but constantly looked at me, and always with a carefully prepared expression of the deepest misery and the profoundest dejection. It quite spoiled my pleasure for that night because it was so very embarrassing and so very ridiculous. But from that time forth, we never went to the play without my seeing Mr. Guppy in the pit, always with his hair straight and flat, his shirt collar turned down, and a general feebleness about him. If he were not there when we went in, and I began to hope he would not come, and yielded myself for a little while to the interest of the scene, I was certain to encounter his languishing eyes when I least expected it, and from that time, to be quite sure that they were fixed upon me all the evening. I really cannot express how uneasy this made me. If he would only have brushed up his hair or turned up his collar, it would have been bad enough. But to know that that absurd figure was always gazing at me, and always in that demonstrative state of despondency, put such a constraint upon me that I did not like to laugh at the play, or to cry at it, or to move, or to speak. I seemed able to do nothing naturally. As to escaping Mr. Guppy by going to the back of the box, I could not bear to do that because I knew Richard and Ada relied on having me next them, and that they could never have talked together so happily if anybody else had been in my place. So there I sat, not knowing where to look, for wherever I looked, I knew Mr. Guppy's eyes were following me, and thinking of the dreadful expense to which this young man was putting himself on my account. Sometimes I thought of telling Mr. Jarndyce. Then I feared that the young man would lose his situation and that I might ruin him. Sometimes I thought of confiding in Richard, but was deterred by the possibility of his fighting Mr. Guppy and giving him black eyes. Sometimes I thought, should I frown at him or shake my head? Then I felt I could not do it. Sometimes I considered whether I should write to his mother, but that ended in my being convinced that to open a correspondence would be to make the matter worse. I always came to the conclusion, finally, that I could do nothing. Mr. Guppy's perseverance all this time not only produced him regularly at any theater to which we went, but caused him to appear in the crowd as we were coming out, and even to get up behind our fly, where I am sure I saw him, 2 or 3 times, struggling among the most dreadful spikes. After we got home, he haunted a post opposite our house. The upholsterers where we lodged being at the corner of 2 streets, and my bedroom window being opposite the post, I was afraid to go near the window when I went upstairs, lest I should see him, as I did one moonlight night, leaning against the post and evidently catching cold. If Mr. Guppy had not been, fortunately for me, engaged in the daytime, I really should have had no rest from him. While we were making this round of gaieties, in which Mr. Guppy so extraordinarily participated, the business which had helped to bring us to town was not neglected. Mr. Kenge's cousin was a Mr. Bayham Badger who had a good practice at Chelsea and attended a large public institution besides. He was quite willing to receive Richard into his house and to superintend his studies, and as it seemed that those could be pursued advantageously under Mr. Badger's roof, and Mr. Badger liked Richard, and as Richard said he liked Mr. Badger well enough, an agreement was made, the Lord Chancellor's consent was obtained, and it was all settled. On the day when matters were concluded between Richard and Mr. Badger, we were all under engagement to dine at Mr. Badger's house. We were to be merely a family party, Mrs. Badger's note said, and we found no lady there but Mrs. Badger herself. She was surrounded in the drawing room by various objects, indicative of her painting a little, playing the piano a little, playing the guitar a little, playing the harp a little, singing a little, working a little, reading a little, writing poetry a little, and botanizing a little. She was a lady of about 50, I should think, youthfully dressed and of a very fine complexion. If I add to the little list of her accomplishments that she rouged a little, I do not mean that there was any harm in it. Mr. Bayham Badger himself was a pink, fresh-faced, crisp-looking gentleman with a weak voice, white teeth, light hair, and surprised eyes, some years younger, I should say, than Mrs. Bayham Badger. He admired her exceedingly, but principally, and to begin with, on the curious ground, as it seemed to us, of her having had 3 husbands. We had barely taken our seats when he said to Mr. Jarndyce quite triumphantly, "You would hardly suppose that I am Mrs. Bayham Badger's 3rd." "Indeed," said Mr. Jarndyce. "Her 3rd," said Mr. Badger. "Mrs. Bayham Badger has not the appearance, Miss Summerson, of a lady who has had 2 former husbands." I said, "Not at all." "And most remarkable men," said Mr. Badger in a tone of confidence. Captain Swosser of the Royal Navy, who was Mrs. Badger's 1st husband, was a very distinguished officer indeed. The name of Professor Dingo, my immediate predecessor, is one of European reputation. Mrs. Badger overheard him and smiled. "Yes, my dear," Mr. Badger replied to the smile, "I was observing to Mr. Jarndyce and Miss Summerson that you had had 2 former husbands, both very distinguished men, and they found it, as people generally do, difficult to believe." "I was barely 20, said Mrs. Badger, when I married Captain Swosser of the Royal Navy. I was in the Mediterranean with him. I am quite a sailor. On the 12th anniversary of my wedding day, I became the wife of Professor Dingo. Of European reputation," added Mr. Badger in an undertone. "And when Mr. Badger and myself were married," pursued Mrs. Badger, "we were married on the same day of the year. I had become attached to the day." "So that Mrs. Badger has been married to 3 husbands, 2 of them highly distinguished men," said Mr. Badger, summing up the facts, "and each time upon the 21st of March at 11 in the forenoon." We all expressed our admiration. "But for Mr. Badger's modesty," said Mr. Jarndyce, "I would take leave to correct him and say 3 distinguished men." "Thank you, Mr. Jarndyce, what I always tell him," observed Mrs. Badger. "And my dear," said Mr. Badger, "what do I always tell you? That without any affectation of disparaging such professional distinction as I may have attained, which our friend Mr. Carstone will have many opportunities of estimating, I am not so weak, no, really," said Mr. Badger to us generally, "so unreasonable, as to put my reputation on the same footing with such first-rate men as Captain Swosser and Professor Dingo. Perhaps you may be interested, Mr. Jarndyce," continued Mr. Bayham Badger, leading the way into the next drawing-room, "in this portrait of Captain Swosser. It was taken on his return home from the African station, where he had suffered from the fever of the country. Mrs. Badger considers it too yellow, but it's a very fine head, a very fine head." We all echoed, "A very fine head." "I feel when I look at it," said Mr. Badger, "that's a man I should like to have seen. It strikingly bespeaks the first-class man that Captain Swosser preeminently was. On the other side, Professor Dingo. I knew him well, attended him in his last illness, a speaking likeness. Over the piano, Mrs. Bayham Badger when Mrs. Swosser. Over the sofa, Mrs. Bayham Badger when Mrs. Dingo. Of Mrs. Bayham Badger and Essie, I possess the original and have no copy." Dinner was now announced, and we went downstairs. It was a very genteel entertainment, very handsomely served. But the captain and the professor still ran in Mr. Badger's head, and as Ada and I had the honor of being under his particular care, we had the full benefit of them. "Water, Miss Summerson, allow me, not in that tumbler, pray, bring me the professor's goblet, James." Ada very much admired some artificial flowers under a glass. "Astonishing how they keep," said Mr. Badger. "They were presented to Mrs. Bayham Badger when she was in the Mediterranean." He invited Mr. Jarndyce to take a glass of claret. "Not that claret," he said. "Excuse me, this is an occasion, and on an occasion I produce some very special claret I happen to have. James, Captain Swosser's wine. Mr. Jarndyce, this is a wine that was imported by the captain, we will not say how many years ago. You will find it very curious. My dear, I shall be happy to take some of this wine with you. Captain Swosser's claret to your mistress, James. My love, your health." After dinner, when we ladies retired, we took Mrs. Badger's first and second husband with us. Mrs. Badger gave us in the drawing-room a biographical sketch of the life and services of Captain Swosser before his marriage, and a more minute account of him dating from the time when he fell in love with her at a ball on board the Crippler, given to the officers of that ship when she lay in Plymouth Harbor. "The dear old Crippler," said Mrs. Badger, shaking her head. "She was a noble vessel, trim, shipshape, all a tonto, as Captain Swosser used to say. You must excuse me if I occasionally introduce a nautical expression. I was quite a sailor once. Captain Swosser loved that craft for my sake. When she was no longer in commission, he frequently said that if he were rich enough to buy her old hulk, he would have an inscription let into the timbers of the quarterdeck where we stood as partners in the dance to mark the spot where he fell, raked fore and aft, Captain Swosser used to say, by the fire from my tops. It was his naval way of mentioning my eyes." Mrs. Badger shook her head, sighed, and looked in the glass. "It was a great change from Captain Swosser to Professor Dingo," she resumed with a plaintive smile. "I felt it a good deal at first, such an entire revolution in my mode of life, but custom, combined with science, particularly science, inured me to it. Being the professor's sole companion in his botanical excursions, I almost forgot that I had ever been afloat and became quite learned. It is singular that the professor was the antipodes of Captain Swosser, and that Mr. Badger is not in the least like either." We then passed into a narrative of the deaths of Captain Swosser and Professor Dingo, both of whom seem to have had very bad complaints. In the course of it, Mrs. Badger signified to us that she had never madly loved but once, and that the object of that wild affection, never to be recalled in its fresh enthusiasm, was Captain Swosser. The professor was yet dying by inches in the most dismal manner, and Mrs. Badger was giving us imitations of his way of saying, with great difficulty, "Where is Laura? Let Laura give me my toast and water," when the entrance of the gentleman consigned him to the tomb. Now I observed that evening, as I had observed for some days past, that Ada and Richard were more than ever attached to each other's society, which was but natural, seeing that they were going to be separated so soon. I was therefore not very much surprised when we got home, and Ada and I retired upstairs to find Ada more silent than usual, though I was not quite prepared for her coming into my arms and beginning to speak to me with her face hidden. "My darling Esther," murmured Ada, "I have a great secret to tell you." "A mighty secret, my pretty one, no doubt." "What is it, Ada?" "Oh, Esther, you would never guess." "Shall I try to guess?" said I. "Oh no, don't, pray don't," cried Ada, very much startled by the idea of my doing so. "Now I wonder who it can be about," said I, pretending to consider. "It's about," said Ada in a whisper, "it's about my cousin Richard." "Well, my own," said I, kissing her bright hair, which was all I could see. "And what about him?" "Oh, Esther, you would never guess." It was so pretty to have her clinging to me in that way, hiding her face, and to know that she was not crying in sorrow but in a little glow of joy and pride and hope that I would not help her just yet. "He says, I know it's very foolish, we are both so young, but he says, with a burst of tears, that he loves me dearly, Esther." "Does he indeed?" said I. "I never heard of such a thing. Why, my pet of pets, I could have told you that weeks and weeks ago." To see Ada lift up her flushed face in joyful surprise and hold me round the neck and laugh and cry and blush was so pleasant. "Why, my darling," said I, "what a goose you must take me for. Your cousin Richard has been loving you as plainly as he could for I don't know how long." "And yet you never said a word about it," cried Ada, kissing me. "No, my love," said I waited to be told. "But now I have told you, you don't think it wrong of me, do you?" returned Ada. She might have coaxed me to say no if I had been the hardest-hearted duenna in the world. Not being that yet, I said no very freely. "And now," said I know the worst of it." "Oh, that's not quite the worst of it, Esther dear," cried Ada, holding me tighter and laying down her face again upon my breast. "No," said I, "not even that." "No, not even that," said Ada, shaking her head. "Why, you never mean to say," I was beginning in joke. But Ada, looking up and smiling through her tears, cried, "Yes, I do, you know I do," and then sobbed out, "With all my heart I do, with all my whole heart, Esther." I told her, laughing, why I had known that too, just as well as I had known the other, and we sat before the fire, and I had all the talking to myself for a little while, though there was not much of it, and Ada was soon quiet and happy. "Do you think my cousin John knows, dear Dame Durden?" she asked. "Unless my cousin John is blind, my pet," said I should think my cousin John knows pretty well as much as we know." "We want to speak to him before Richard goes," said Ada timidly, "and we wanted you to advise us and to tell him so. Perhaps you wouldn't mind Richard's coming in, Dame Durden." "Oh, Richard is outside, is he, my dear?" said I. "I am not quite certain," returned Ada with a bashful simplicity that would have won my heart if she had not won it long before, "but I think he's waiting at the door." There he was, of course. They brought a chair on either side of me and put me between them and really seemed to have fallen in love with me instead of one another. They were so confiding and so trustful and so fond of me. They went on in their own wild way for a little while. I never stopped them, I enjoyed it too much myself, and then we gradually fell to considering how young they were, and how there must be a lapse of several years before this early love could come to anything, and how it could come to happiness only if it were real and lasting, and inspired them with a steady resolution to do their duty to each other, with constancy, fortitude, and perseverance, each always for the other's sake. Well, Richard said that he would work his fingers to the bone for Ada, and Ada said that she would work her fingers to the bone for Richard, and they called me all sorts of endearing and sensible names, and we sat there, advising and talking half the night. Finally, before we parted, I gave them my promise to speak to their cousin John tomorrow. So when tomorrow came, I went to my guardian after breakfast, in the room that was our town substitute for the growlery, and told him that I had it in trust to tell him something. "Well, little woman," said he, shutting up his book, "if you have accepted the trust, there can be no harm in it." "I hope not, guardian," said I. "I can guarantee that there is no secrecy in it, for it only happened yesterday." And what is it, Esther?" "Guardian," said I, "you remember the happy night when first we came down to Bleak House, when Ada was singing in the dark room?" I wish to call to his remembrance the look he had given me then. Unless I am much mistaken, I saw that I did so. "Because," said I with a little hesitation. "Yes, my dear," said he, "don't hurry." "Because," said I, "Ada and Richard have fallen in love, and have told each other so." Already, cried my guardian, quite astonished. Yes, said I, and to tell you the truth, guardian, I rather expected it. The deuce you did, said he. He sat considering for a minute or two, with his smile, at once so handsome and so kind, upon his changing face, and then requested me to let them know that he wished to see them. When they came, he encircled Ada with one arm in his fatherly way and addressed himself to Richard with a cheerful gravity. Rick, said Mr. Jarndyce, I am glad to have won your confidence. I hope to preserve it. When I contemplated these relations between us four which have so brightened my life and so invested it with new interests and pleasures, I certainly did contemplate afar off the possibility of you and your pretty cousin here. Don't be shy, Ada, don't be shy, my dear, being in a mind to go through life together. I saw and do see many reasons to make it desirable, but that was afar off, Rick, afar off. We look afar off, sir, returned Richard. Well, said Mr. Jarndyce, that's rational. Now hear me, my dears. I might tell you that you don't know your own minds yet, that 1,000 things may happen to divert you from one another, that it is well this chain of flowers you have taken up is very easily broken, or it might become a chain of lead. But I will not do that. Such wisdom will come soon enough, I dare say, if it's to come at all. I will assume that a few years hence you will be in your hearts to one another what you are today. All I say before speaking to you according to that assumption is, if you do change, if you do come to find that you are more commonplace cousins to each other as man and woman than you were as boy and girl, your manhood will excuse me, Rick. Don't be ashamed still to confide in me, for there will be nothing monstrous or uncommon in it. I am only your friend and distant kinsman. I have no power over you whatever, but I wish and hope to retain your confidence if I do nothing to forfeit it. I am very sure, sir, returned Richard, that I speak for Ada too when I say that you have the strongest power over us both, rooted in respect, gratitude, and affection, strengthening every day. Dear Cousin John, said Ada on his shoulder, my father's place can never be empty again. All the love and duty I could ever have rendered to him is transferred to you. Come, said Mr. Jarndyce, now for our assumption. Now we lift our eyes up and look hopefully at the distance. Rick, the world is before you, and it is most probable that as you enter it, so it will receive you. Trust in nothing but in Providence and your own efforts. Never separate the two like the heathen wagoner. Constancy in love is a good thing, but it means nothing and is nothing without constancy in every kind of effort. If you had the abilities of all the great men, past and present, you could do nothing well without sincerely meaning it and setting about it. If you entertain the supposition that any real success in great things or in small, ever was or could be, ever will or can be, wrested from fortune by fits and starts, leave that wrong idea here or leave your cousin Ada here. I will leave it here, sir, replied Richard smiling, if I brought it here just now, but I hope I did not, and will work my way on to my cousin Ada in the hopeful distance. Right, said Mr. Jarndyce, if you are not to make her happy, why should you pursue her? I wouldn't make her unhappy, no, not even for her love, retorted Richard proudly. Well said, cried Mr. Jarndyce. That's well said. She remains here in her home with me. Love her, Rick, in your active life no less than in her home when you revisit it, and all will go well. Otherwise, all will go ill. That's the end of my preaching. I think you and Ada had better take a walk. Ada tenderly embraced him, and Richard heartily shook hands with him, and then the cousins went out of the room, looking back again directly, though, to say that they would wait for me. Door stood open, and we both followed them with our eyes as they passed down the adjoining room, on which the sun was shining and out at its farther end. Richard, with his head bent and her hand drawn through his arm, was talking to her very earnestly, and she looked up in his face, listening, and seemed to see nothing else. So young, so beautiful, so full of hope and promise, it went on lightly through the sunlight as their own happy thoughts might then be traversing the years to come, and making them all years of brightness. So they passed away into the shadow and were gone. It was only a burst of light that had been so radiant. The room darkened as they went out, and the sun was clouded over. Am I right, Esther? Said my guardian when they were gone. He was so good and wise to ask me whether he was right. Rick may gain out of this the quality he wants at the core of so much that is good, said Mr. Jarndyce, shaking his head. I have said nothing to Ada, Esther. She has her friend and counselor always near. And he laid his hand lovingly upon my head. I could not help showing that I was a little moved, though I did all I could to conceal it. Tut tut, said he, but we must take care, too, that our little woman's life is not all consumed in care for others. Care, my dear guardian, I believe I am the happiest creature in the world. I believe so, too, said he, but someone may find out what Esther never will, that the little woman is to be held in remembrance above all other people. I have omitted to mention in its place that there was someone else at the family dinner party. It was not a lady. It was a gentleman. It was a gentleman of a dark complexion, a young surgeon. He was rather reserved, but I thought him very sensible and agreeable. At least, Ada asked me if I did not, and I said yes. Chapter 14. Deportment. Richard left us on the very next evening to begin his new career, and committed Ada to my charge with great love for her and great trust in me. It touched me then to reflect, and it touches me now more nearly to remember having what I have to tell how they both thought of me even at that engrossing time. I was a part of all their plans for the present and the future. I was to write Richard once a week, making my faithful report of Ada, who was to write to him every alternate day. I was to be informed under his own hand of all his labors and successes. I was to observe how resolute and persevering he would be. I was to be Ada's bridesmaid when they were married. I was to live with them afterwards. I was to keep all the keys of their house. I was to be made happy forever and a day. And if the suit should make us rich, Esther, which it may, you know, said Richard to crown all. A shade crossed Ada's face. My dearest Ada, asked Richard, why not? It had better declare us poor at once, said Ada. Oh, I don't know about that, returned Richard, but at all events it won't declare anything at once. It hasn't declared anything in heaven knows how many years. Too true, said Ada. Yes, but, urged Richard, answering what her look suggested rather than her words, the longer it goes on, dear cousin, the nearer it must be to a settlement one way or other. Now, is not that reasonable? You know best, Richard, but I am afraid if we trust to it, it will make us unhappy. But my Ada, we are not going to trust to it, cried Richard gaily. We know it better than to trust to it. We only say that if it should make us rich, we have no constitutional objection to being rich. The court is, by solemn settlement of law, our grim old guardian, and we are to suppose that what it gives us, when it gives us anything, is our right. It is not necessary to quarrel with our right. No, said Ada, but it may be better to forget all about it. Well, well, cried Richard, then we will forget all about it. We consign the whole thing to oblivion. Dame Durden puts on her approving face, and it's done. Dame Durden's approving face, said I, looking out of the box in which I was packing his books, was not very visible when you called it by that name, but it does approve, and she thinks you can't do better. So Richard said there was an end of it, and immediately began, on no other foundation, to build as many castles in the air as would man the Great Wall of China. He went away in high spirits. Ada and I, prepared to miss him very much, commenced our quieter career. On our arrival in London, we had called with Mr. Jarndyce at Mrs. Jellyby's, but had not been so fortunate as to find her at home. It appeared that she had gone somewhere to tea-drinking and had taken Miss Jellyby with her. Besides the tea-drinking, there was to be some considerable speech-making and letter-writing on the general merits of the cultivation of coffee, conjointly with natives, at the settlement of Borrioboola. All this involved, no doubt, sufficient active exercise of pen and ink to make her daughter's part in the proceedings anything but a holiday. Being now beyond the time appointed for Mrs. Jellyby's return, we called again. She was in town, but not at home, having gone to Mile End directly after breakfast on some Borrioboola business, arising out of a society called the East London Branch Aid Ramification. As I had not seen Peepy on the occasion of our last call, when he was not to be found anywhere, and when the cook rather thought he must have strolled away with the dustman's cart, I now inquired for him again. The oyster shells he had been building a house with were still in the passage, but he was nowhere discoverable, and the cook supposed that he had gone after the sheep. When we repeated, with some surprise, "The sheep," she said, "Oh yes, on market days he sometimes followed them quite out of town and came back in such a state as never was." I was sitting at the window with my guardian on the following morning, and Ada was busy writing, of course, to Richard, when Miss Jellyby was announced and entered, leading the identical Peepy, whom she had made some endeavors to render presentable by wiping the dirt into corners of his face and hands and making his hair very wet, and then violently frizzling it with her fingers. Everything the dear child wore was either too large for him or too small. Among his other contradictory decorations, he had the hat of a bishop and the little gloves of a baby. His boots were on a small scale, the boots of a plowman, while his legs, so crossed and recrossed with scratches that they looked like maps, were bare below a very short pair of plaid drawers finished off with two frills of perfectly different patterns. The deficient buttons on his plaid frock had evidently been supplied from one of Mr. Jellyby's coats. They were so extremely brazen and so much too large. Most extraordinary specimens of needlework appeared on several parts of his dress where it had been hastily mended, and I recognized the same hand on Miss Jellyby's. She was, however, unaccountably improved in her appearance and looked very pretty. She was conscious of poor little Peepy being but a failure after all her trouble, and she showed it as she came in by the way in which she glanced first at him and then at us. "Oh dear me," said my guardian, "due east." Ada and I gave her a cordial welcome and presented her to Mr. Jarndyce, to whom she said as she sat down, "Ma's compliments, and she hopes you'll excuse her because she's correcting proofs of the plan. She's going to put out 5,000 new circulars, and she knows you'll be interested to hear that. I have brought one of them with me, Ma's compliments," with which she presented it sulkily enough. "Thank you," said my guardian. "I am much obliged to Mrs. Jellyby. Oh dear me, this is a very trying wind." We were busy with Peepee taking off his clerical hat, asking him if he remembered us, and so on. Peepee retired behind his elbow at first, but relented at the sight of sponge cake and allowed me to take him on my lap, where he sat munching quietly. Mr. Jarndyce then withdrawing into the temporary growlery, Miss Jellyby opened a conversation with her usual abruptness. "We are going on just as bad as ever in Thavies Inn," said she. "I have no peace of my life. Talk of Africa, I couldn't be worse off if I was a what's-his-name man and a brother." I tried to say something soothing. "Oh, it's of no use, Miss Summerson," exclaimed Miss Jellyby, "though I thank you for the kind intention all the same. I know how I am used, and I am not to be talked over. You wouldn't be talked over if you were used so. Peepee, go and play at wild beasts under the piano." "I shan't," said Peepee. "Very well, you ungrateful, naughty, hard-hearted boy," returned Miss Jellyby with tears in her eyes. "I'll never take pains to dress you any more." "Yes, I will go, Caddy," cried Peepee, who was really a good child and who was so moved by his sister's vexation that he went at once. "It seems a little thing to cry about," said poor Miss Jellyby apologetically, "but I am quite worn out. I was directing the new circulars till 2 this morning. I detest the whole thing so that alone makes my head ache till I can't see out of my eyes. And look at that poor unfortunate child, was there ever such a fright as he is?" Peepee, happily unconscious of the defects in his appearance, sat on the carpet behind one of the legs of the piano, looking calmly out of his den at us while he ate his cake. "I have sent him to the other end of the room," observed Miss Jellyby, drawing her chair nearer ours, "because I don't want him to hear the conversation. Those little things are so sharp. I was going to say, we really are going on worse than ever. Pa will be a bankrupt before long, and then I hope Ma will be satisfied. There'll be nobody but Ma to thank for it." We said we hoped Mr. Jellyby's affairs were not in so bad a state as that. "It's of no use hopping, though it's very kind of you," returned Miss Jellyby, shaking her head. "Pa told me only yesterday morning, and dreadfully unhappy he is that he couldn't weather the storm. I should be surprised if he could. When all our tradesmen send into our house any stuff they like, and the servants do what they like with it, and I have no time to improve things if I knew how, and Ma don't care about anything, I should like to make out how Pa is to weather the storm. I declare if I was Pa, I'd run away." "My dear," said I, smiling, "your papa no doubt considers his family." "Oh yes, his family is all very fine, Miss Summerson," replied Miss Jellyby, "but what comfort is his family to him? His family is nothing but bills, dirt, waste, noise, tumbles downstairs, confusion, and wretchedness. His scrambling home from week's end to week's end is like one great washing day, only nothing's washed." Miss Jellyby tapped her foot upon the floor and wiped her eyes. "I am sure I pity Pa to that degree," she said, "and am so angry with Ma that I can't find words to express myself. However, I am not going to bear it. I am determined. I won't be a slave all my life, and I won't submit to be proposed to by Mr. Qualley. A pretty thing indeed to marry a philanthropist. As if I hadn't had enough of that," said poor Miss Jellyby. I must confess that I could not help feeling rather angry with Mrs. Jellyby myself, seeing and hearing this neglected girl, and knowing how much of bitterly satirical truth there was in what she said. "If it wasn't that we had been intimate when you stopped at our house," pursued Miss Jellyby, "I should have been ashamed to come here today, for I know what a figure I must seem to you too. But as it is, I made up my mind to call, especially as I am not likely to see you again the next time you come to town." She said this with such great significance that Ada and I glanced at one another, foreseeing something more. "No," said Miss Jellyby, shaking her head, "not at all likely. I know I may trust you too. I am sure you won't betray me. I am engaged." "Without their knowledge at home," said I. "Why, good gracious me, Miss Summerson," she returned, justifying herself in a fretful but not angry manner. "How can it be otherwise? You know what Ma is, and I needn't make poor Pa more miserable by telling him. "But would it not be adding to his unhappiness to marry without his knowledge or consent, my dear?" said I. "No," said Miss Jellyby, softening, "I hope not. I should try to make him happy and comfortable when he came to see me, and Peepee and the others should take it in turns to come and stay with me, and they should have some care taken of them then." There was a good deal of affection in poor Caddy. She softened more and more while saying this, and cried so much over the unwanted little home picture she had raised in her mind that Peepee in his cave under the piano was touched, and turned himself over on his back with loud lamentations. It was not until I had brought him to kiss his sister and had restored him to his place on my lap, and had shown him that Caddy was laughing, she laughed expressly for the purpose, that we could recall his peace of mind. Even then, it was for some time conditional on his taking us in turns by the chin and smoothing our faces all over with his hand. At last, as his spirits were not equal to the piano, we put him on a chair to look out of window, and Miss Jellyby, holding him by one leg, resumed her confidence. "It began in your coming to our house," she said. "We naturally asked how. I felt I was so awkward," she replied, "that I made up my mind to be improved in that respect at all events and to learn to dance. I told Ma I was ashamed of myself and I must be taught to dance. Ma looked at me in that provoking way of hers as if I wasn't in sight, but I was quite determined to be taught to dance, and so I went to Mr. Turveydrop's academy in Newman Street." "And was it there, my dear?" I began. "Yes, it was there," said Caddy, "and I am engaged to Mr. Turveydrop. There are two Mr. Turveydrops, father and son. My Mr. Turveydrop is the son, of course. I only wish I had been better brought up and was likely to make him a better wife, for I am very fond of him." "I am sorry to hear this," said I must confess. "I don't know why you should be sorry," she retorted a little anxiously, "but I am engaged to Mr. Turveydrop whether or no, and he is very fond of me. It's a secret as yet, even on his side, because old Mr. Turveydrop has a share in the connection and it might break his heart or give him some other shock if he was told of it abruptly. Old Mr. Turveydrop is a very gentlemanly man indeed, very gentlemanly." "Does his wife know of it?" asked Ada. "Old Mr. Turveydrop's wife, Miss Clare," returned Miss Jellyby, opening her eyes. "There's no such person, he is a widower." We were here interrupted by Peepy, whose leg had undergone so much on account of his sister's unconsciously jerking it like a bell rope, whenever she was emphatic that the afflicted child now bemoaned his sufferings with a very low-spirited noise. As he appealed to me for compassion, and as I was only a listener, I undertook to hold him. Miss Jellyby proceeded, after begging Peepy's pardon with a kiss and assuring him that she hadn't meant to do it. "That's the state of the case," said Caddy. "If I ever blame myself, I still think it's Ma's fault. We are to be married whenever we can, and then I shall go to Pa at the office and write to Ma. It won't much agitate Ma, I am only pen and ink to her. One great comfort is," said Caddy with a sob, "that I shall never hear of Africa after I am married. Young Mr. Turveydrop hates it for my sake, and if old Mr. Turveydrop knows there is such a place, it's as much as he does." "It was he who was very gentlemanly, I think," said I. "Very gentlemanly indeed," said Caddy. "He is celebrated almost everywhere for his deportment." "Does he teach?" asked Ada. "No, he don't teach anything in particular," replied Caddy, "but his deportment is beautiful." Caddy went on to say with considerable hesitation and reluctance that there was one thing more she wished us to know, and felt we ought to know, and which she hoped would not offend us. It was that she had improved her acquaintance with Miss Flite, the little crazy old lady, and that she frequently went there early in the morning and met her lover for a few minutes before breakfast, only for a few minutes. "I go there at other times," said Caddy, "but Prince does not come then. Young Mr. Turveydrop's name is Prince. I wish it wasn't because it sounds like a dog, but of course he didn't christen himself. Old Mr. Turveydrop had him christened Prince in remembrance of the Prince Regent. Old Mr. Turveydrop adored the Prince Regent on account of his deportment. I hope you won't think the worse of me for having made these little appointments at Miss Flite, where I first went with you, because I like the poor thing for her own sake, and I believe she likes me. If you could see young Mr. Turveydrop, I am sure you would think well of him. At least, I am sure you couldn't possibly think any ill of him. I am going there now for my lesson. I couldn't ask you to go with me, Miss Summerson, but if you would," said Caddy, who had said all this earnestly and tremblingly, "I should be very glad, very glad." It happened that we had arranged with my guardian to go to Miss Flite's that day. We had told him of our former visit and our account had interested him, but something had always happened to prevent our going there again. As I trusted that I might have sufficient influence with Miss Jellyby to prevent her taking any very rash step, if I fully accepted the confidence she was so willing to place in me, poor girl, I proposed that she and I and Peepy should go to the academy and afterwards meet my guardian and Ada at Miss Flite, whose name I now learnt for the first time. This was on condition that Miss Jellyby and Peepy should come back with us to dinner. The last article of the agreement being joyfully acceded to by both, we smartened Peepy up a little with the assistance of a few pins, some soap and water, and a hairbrush, and went out, bending our steps towards Newman Street, which was very near. I found the academy established in a sufficiently dingy house at the corner of an archway, with busts in all the staircase windows. In the same house there were also established, as I gathered from the plates on the door, a drawing master, a coal merchant. There was certainly no room for his coals, and a lithographic artist. On the plate which in size and situation took precedence of all the rest, I read Mr. Turveydrop. The door was open and the hall was blocked up by a grand piano, a harp, and several other musical instruments in cases, all in progress of removal and all looking rakish in the daylight. Miss Jellyby informed me that the academy had been lent last night for a concert. We went upstairs. It had been quite a fine house once, when it was anybody's business to keep it clean and fresh, and nobody's business to smoke in it all day, and into Mr. Turveydrop's great room, which was built out into a mews at the back and was lighted by a skylight. It was a bare, resounding room smelling of stables, with cane forms along the walls, and the walls ornamented at regular intervals with painted lyres and little cut-glass branches for candles, which seemed to be shedding their old-fashioned drops as other branches might shed autumn leaves. Several young lady pupils, ranging from 13 or 14 years of age to 2 or 3 and 20, were assembled, and I was looking among them for their instructor when Caddy, pinching my arm, repeated the ceremony of introduction. "Miss Summerson, Mr. Prince Turveydrop." I curtsied to a little blue-eyed fair man of youthful appearance with flaxen hair parted in the middle and curling at the ends all round his head. He had a little fiddle, which we used to call at school a kit, under his left arm and its little bow in the same hand. His little dancing shoes were particularly diminutive, and he had a little innocent, feminine manner which not only appealed to me in an amiable way, but made this singular effect upon me, that I received the impression that he was like his mother, and that his mother had not been much considered or well used. "I am very happy to see Miss Jellyby's friend," he said, bowing low to me. I began to fear, with timid tenderness, as it was past the usual time, that Miss Jellyby was not coming. "I beg you will have the goodness to attribute that to me, who have detained her, and to receive my excuses, sir," said I. "Oh dear," said he. "And pray," I entreated, "do not allow me to be the cause of any more delay." With that apology I withdrew to a seat between Peepy, who, being well used to it, had already climbed into a corner place, and an old lady of a censorious countenance whose 2 nieces were in the class and who was very indignant with Peepy's boots. Prince Turveydrop then tinkled the strings of his kit with his fingers, and the young ladies stood up to dance. Just then there appeared from a side door old Mr. Turveydrop in the full luster of his deportment. He was a fat old gentleman with a false complexion, false teeth, false whiskers, and a wig. He had a fur collar, and he had a padded breast to his coat which only wanted a star or a broad blue ribbon to be complete. He was pinched in and swelled out and got up and strapped down as much as he could possibly bear. He had such a neckcloth on, puffing his very eyes out of their natural shape, and his chin and even his ears so sunk into it, that it seemed as though he must inevitably double up if it were cast loose. He had under his arm a hat of great size and weight, shelving downward from the crown to the brim, and in his hand a pair of white gloves with which he flapped it as he stood poised on one leg in a high-shouldered, round-elbowed state of elegance not to be surpassed. He had a cane, he had an eyeglass, he had a snuff-box, he had rings, he had wristbands, he had everything but any touch of nature. He was not like youth, he was not like age, he was not like anything in the world but a model of deportment. "Father, a visitor, Miss Jellyby's friend, Miss Summerson." "Distinguished," said Mr. Turveydrop, "by Miss Summerson's presence." As he bowed to me in that tight state, I almost believe I saw creases come into the whites of his eyes. "My father," said the son aside to me with quite an affecting belief in him, "is a celebrated character. My father is greatly admired." "Go on, Prince, go on," said Mr. Turveydrop, standing with his back to the fire and waving his gloves condescendingly. "Go on, my son." At this command, or by this gracious permission, the lesson went on. Prince Turveydrop sometimes played the kit dancing, sometimes played the piano standing, sometimes hummed the tune with what little breath he could spare while he set a pupil right, always conscientiously moved with the least proficient through every step and every part of the figure, and never rested for an instant. His distinguished father did nothing whatever but stand before the fire, a model of deportment. "And he never does anything else," said the old lady of the censorious countenance. "Yet would you believe that it's his name on the doorplate?